as being durable, transferable, divisible, scarce, recognizable, and fungible. Sound. Money.
I mean, I know what cryptocurrency is.
Why don't you tell me what you know about Bitcoin as a jumping off point?
Okay, sure.
Yo, check it. Hey, yo, fuck cash currently. Cuddies pay me in cryptocurrency. For the crystals that I cut with the cutlery. Anonymous, don't have to meet plugs on the corner now. Press enter on the keyboard. I send your order out 100 miles an hour as we cruise down the Silk Road. Blowing OG out the whip, trying to pull hoes. I dream of empires, trying to stack guap like niggas who work on Wall Street. So I'm chasing buyers. Log in, there's plenty of users and consumers getting high and rich off of their computer. Ain't nothing new, this info wait for everybody, yo. Use it to your advantage to take over your body, yo. Magic mushrooms, I had them eating them like Mario. Blockchain heavy, got it clicking with the Molly flow. And niggas gotta know.
It was founded by a Japanese guy.
Or guys, or girls, going by the name Satoshi Nakamoto in 2008. True identity still unknown.
Talking about niggas Skrilla, man, we out here. Lordy. Yeah, I told my Lordy to take a look inside the dark market. Upload the Bitcoin, we going car shopping. Yeah, you wanted me to check out your music page, you not popping. Knock gas out like Bernard Hopkins. I got a computer geek white boy to go to John Hopkins. One Bitcoin worth $8,000. Let's get it. Found the vendor off the Tor browser, bought product and flipped it. He just needed a drop addy for where they gonna ship it. It wasn't a scam, he read the forms before he made a decision. Until he ran into his man Skrilla. Yeah, told him we can do this shit legally, no need for paraphernalia. Just keep your word, I heard here's somebody that'll kill you. I'm on a Coinbase, looking kinda familiar, like I've been here before. I see the transaction on the blockchain, you gotta spin with your boy. Shoot me the address of the wallet, and I'ma send it tomorrow. Just make me want run up in all black on the horse like Zorro. It'll be best to control the temperature, Paco. Put a nigga ass in the footy nails, there won't be nobody there to help me. Coinbase layout super easy, there's no way I can fail you. Use the VPN so the boys have no way to trail you. The move at fast pace, I had to control the hash rate. The value of the Bitcoin decreased, it was a bad day. Misogynist acts use bitches' backs as an ashtray. Skate on bitches like Cascade. I'm out. My lordy got a Bitcoin ATM in his living room. All of the cash I had in my pocket, I wanted to give it to him. With the vision, I'm vicariously living through him. I told my bro it's a way that we can make money even though it's different for him. He got a new job contract, want me to rip it for him. Told me any ideas I had in my mind, go ahead, pitch it to him. My dude's busting the room like, what are you niggas doing? Get money in that bag, dog. Give me the I told my lordy to take a look inside the dark market. Upload the Bitcoin, we call car shopping. Yeah, you wanted me to check out your music page, you not popping. Now gas out like Bernard Hopkins. I got a computer geek white boy, you go to John Hopkins. One Bitcoin worth $8,000. Let's get it. Found the vendor off the Tor browser, bought product and flipped it. He just needed a drop addy for where they gonna ship it. It wasn't a scam, he read the forms before he made a decision. Until he ran into his man Skrilla. With the raps and the Bitcoin, we can make 11 million. Get a dose of me, that's how the medicine heal you. Hear me? Give me though. Give my Rob Lordy. My Rob Lordy.
Not in generations has Wall Street absorbed the number of body blows it took today.
The world has gone mad and the system is broken.
The American financial system is rocked to its foundation as top Wall Street institutions topple under a mountain of debt.
Bailed out by the taxpayers.
It's pretty clear they cannot be trusted.
He said, your problem is that you're trying to understand this as an economic story. Once you look at it as a crime story, you'll get it.
Fed is losing control once again. In just a couple of days, the U.S. Federal Reserve has pumped out $125 billion and handed that money over to commercial banks once again.
My fellow Americans, just like many of you, my family and I are social distancing. And it's important that everyone take this seriously so that we can beat this thing. And Joe, if you're watching this, 6 foot distance from everyone, buddy. Actually, that's probably a good rule for you to follow at all times. But anyway, Michelle and I are doing fine. But we did just run out of good shows to watch on Netflix. I gotta tell you though, I just started reading up on this whole Bitcoin thing, and boy oh boy, I think I'm falling down the, what do you Bitcoiners call it? Falling down the rabbit hole. As Michelle and I waited 3 hours just to get inside Costco, we ran into this gentleman who did a hell of a job pitching Bitcoin to us. Jameson Lopp was his name, a real stand-up guy. And he has a great website full of resources. I'm learning so much. I just listened to the Audible of the Bitcoin Standard from Sapien the Moose, and I just started Jan Pritzker's book, Inventing Bitcoin. Michelle, if you're ordering more supplies, you better be checking on deals on Lolly and Fold. We need to be stacking sats. Yes, whenever we can, damn it. Stacking sats, right? Am I saying that right? Sup, freaks. Anyway, folks, I just thought I'd share with you what I'm learning. But basically, in the words of the great Murray Rothbard, what has the government done to our money? The more I learn about how we've screwed up the money, the more obvious it is to me that Bitcoin fixes this. There are just so many misconceptions about Bitcoin. But America, I've decided it's time I help clear up those misconceptions. For example, I used to think Bitcoin wasted all this energy. But today, I heard this real all-American guy from Philly. His name's Marty Bent. He's got this podcast, and I heard him explain perfectly and rationally how Bitcoin is actually good for the environment. Heck, it's the real new Green Deal. I don't know about you, America, but I'm a believer in this Bitcoin thing. Might be a good idea for me to get some in case this thing catches on. Well, folks, my fellow citizens, I'm going to continue doing my own research, but stay safe and stay tuned. Michelle, did my VR headset arrive? I need it for Udi's VR Bitcoin meetup. What? Normally I can't borrow it. This Bitcoin thing's important. How many times I gotta tell you?
Justin, why haven't you been texting me back? I'm pissed.
Okay, well, let me.
You guys, so apparently the sound was off, so I totally messed that one up. Let's do the intros one more time. Will, what's up?
Oh, come on.
Oh, wow.
It's better now. I'm sorry.
But what about all my good jokes?
Now we practice.
They don't exist.
I'm Will Cole. I'm the Chief Product Officer at Unchained Capital, enthusiastic Bitcoiner, formerly on the Wyoming Blockchain Task Force, and I'm happy to be here. I already ate my steak, so everyone else can show you theirs.
All right, you guys know the order. Next, Phil.
Hey everyone, I'm Phil Geiger. I'm the Director of Product Marketing at Unchained Capital. Really glad we were all able to get together this evening to push the price of Bitcoin over $10,000. I'm enjoying a 10-year aged scotch in celebration. Thanks for having me.
Bitstein.
Howdy, I'm Bitstein, aka Michael Goldstein, president of the Satoshi Nakamoto Institute, co-host of the Noted Bitcoin podcast, and also enthusiastic about Bitcoin.
Foxman.
Hi, I'm Michael. Sorry about the dog in the background. That's Holly. She's protecting us. Anyway, enthusiastic Bitcoiner, and tonight I'll do a little demo of MAP gas as a way to sear your steak instead of propane. So if y'all want to see that, it's hotter.
Cool. Okay. Brian.
Hey, Brian Bishop, CTO at Avanti Bank and Trust, Bitcoin developer.
Let's go. Thanks again for coming on, Drew.
I'm Drew Fans. I also work at Unchained Capital. It's nice to be on tonight.
Let's get some energy. Justin, what's up, man?
I'm Justin. Got a massive steak here. I'm ready to talk about all things Bitcoin.
Let's go. Jimmy Song.
I'm Jimmy Song. I'm an Asian guy in a cowboy hat. I've written a couple of books. I am enjoying a beef tartare with egg yolk. Yeah, it's raw beef. I'm really eating it, and it's amazing because I don't know. I like the taste of raw beef now. Yeah,
all right,
quarantine
Buck.
can do strange things.
My name is Buck Burley. I also recently joined Unchained Capital here in Austin, also enthusiastic Bitcoiner since about 2014, 2015. And I have no steak, just a beer, but it's a Austin Beer Works, so local brew. Nice and refreshing.
All right, last but not least, Parker. Thanks for organizing, by the way.
Absolutely. I'm Parker. I'm eating a 70-day dry-aged cowboy ribeye. Definitely the best steak of this group. And I write a series called Gradually and Suddenly, and I work at Unchained. Happy to be here.
Awesome.
Justin finally texted me back, too, so I'm less pissed.
So my ticker says we're officially above 10,000. Is everyone in sync and consensus that we are above 10,000?
Yeah, my ticker
It is.
also
That means
says
that Jimmy and I
10,000.
are going to Lockhart this weekend.
Yeah, it looks like it because just to give you guys a little bit of a background, one of the things that Will's been telling me is that my cowboy hats are not good enough. Apparently, there are better cowboy hats in Lockhart that we have to go and get. And we made a deal back when Bitcoin was like I don't know. This was like 9 months ago or something like that when it was around 5,000. And he said, when it hits 10,000, we're going there and we're going to make sure you get a really good hat. Of course, Bitcoin has risen above 10,000 several times since then, but we never coordinated enough to actually go down there. And my working hypothesis is that we need to go and get the hat from Lockhart in order to solidify Bitcoin at that price and make sure that we never go below that again.
We won't let everyone down this time. We got it.
You guys heard it here. If Bitcoin goes back down, it's Jimmy's fault.
Hey, Jimmy.
What? It might be Will's fault too.
No, I'm sick of it.
Lockhart's
He's the one that's got to pay for it.
Yeah, you're the guy who needs a better hat.
Is
Yeah,
there
I was
like
just gonna
an
say-
emerging cowboy hat pattern to the charts? Is that what we're talking about?
Yeah, when it finally shoots up. Yeah.
It's like a BART, but it's in fact actually a cowboy hat.
Stock
I'm
the
just
cowboy hat
wondering-
model.
Yes.
I'm wondering how much Jimmy's actually going to be able to sell that hat to raise money for the Nakamoto Institute at the BitBlock Boom. You know, if he sold a bad hat for $1,500 or however many Satoshis.
That takes a very drunk Peter McCormack to show up. Yeah.
Was that Peter who bought it?
Well, he paid. Well, he paid even more. But the third one I sold, that was at La Bitconf. That I think went for like 0.3 Bitcoin or something like that. So it was
Sounds
even
like they're
more.
not as scarce as people think.
So far they haven't been. They've all been the straw type, like which this one is. It's a straw hat. The more expensive ones tend to be made out of felt.
Is this your nonprofit hats for Sats?
That's a great.
I like
That's a
that
great.
idea.
You can have that one.
I'll take it.
Casual.
You could tell he's the marketing guy, right?
All right, Bitcoin's back under 10,000.
What? It says 10,013 for me.
Yeah, I got 10,000.
I'm watching. I guess this is Bitfinex.
Jimmy and Will need to leave the call right now.
It's back.
I don't
over
know
now.
if so. Is the Lockhart hat store open or no? I don't know what the heck is going on with the lockdown. So.
Abbott's open everything in Texas. We're going to be let out of our cages, and it's going to be okay to go outside, and we're going to get some hats.
Okay, so it is available to go.
I'm pretty sure this will be the first store to reopen.
The Lockhart.
The price of Bitcoin depends on it.
Yeah, I mean, like essential service. This is it.
All right, guys. Let's get into some of the drinking rules. I don't know how many of you actually have drinks, but in this game, if you say the wrong words, you must drink. So today, the drinking rules are: if you say "sound money," you must drink. If you say "COVID-19," you must drink, and if you say "stock to flow," you must drink. It's on the screen. Don't mess up, otherwise you're gonna drink. Cheers.
Cheers.
I don't have anything to say now.
I was gonna say gold.
Can you say S2F?
Drink.
Maybe. I guess. I think that's okay. But yeah, just be careful and don't drink.
I think that should be drink as well. Like,
All right, so
can I
everyone
say
says S2F is
coronavirus
drink?
instead of COVID-19? I think so.
S2F is drink.
I thought this was called drinks in quarantine, and we're trying not to drink.
No, you have to drink whenever you say it.
No,
Okay.
by having the rules, you're forcing people to drink. That's why the rules should be as inclusive as possible.
Sometimes the logo looks like it says "drunks in quarantine" too. So eventually we'll be there too.
Did you say there's a board?
Yeah, you can't see it, but on the stream there's a bunch of graphics. It's real good. All right. Next, I guess we can just move on to the next thing. We have bullish or bearish. Before we get into that, does anyone else want to bring up any other topics or subjects to the crew?
Can we make fun of you more for the ramen? Because I think that's pretty shameful that you are eating ramen while the rest of us are eating like steak. Or
I feel like he heard, Austin, and he thought we'd be tolerant of ramen because of the ramen restaurants here, but he doesn't know us very well.
They're
no,
excellent.
he doesn't. No.
The ramen restaurants in Austin are excellent, almost as good as SF.
Okay, I'm gonna give you my finger of shame. Okay, this is shame being doled out to you over here. What is that
excellent.
background?
It's my my avatar. Don't worry about it. All right, guys. First subject we have for bullish or bearish. Bullish or bearish on institutional investors. Let's go with Brian.
Oh, come on. You're giving me an easy one. Pretty bullish on institutional investors. We finally have the ability to service them. Yeah, I mean, Wyoming has passed the laws necessary to allow this. So let's go. Let's get started.
Just jump in. You don't need me.
Can we be bullish for a completely different reason?
I don't think so.
So, I mean, if you look at the news today, Paul Tudor Jones came out saying that he's buying Bitcoin, old school billionaire hedge fund Tudor Capital. And while it is great that there's more institutional ways for him to hold Bitcoin, if you read his press release, he said he's only going to hold Bitcoin futures through
Is that
CME.
the cash settled futures? Do you know?
I believe so, but his point was saying that he wasn't going to be touching the Bitcoin. He just wants exposure to the price because of the scarcity, which is obviously not real Bitcoin. But if you look at institutional money coming in, that's pretty neat.
maybe to take a little bit of an adversarial tone here, I think Flaxman is kind of right. Like, I'm really bullish too that a lot of these institutions are going to come in and it's going to be a lot of new money and it's going to be awesome, and the price will keep going up, and let's hope. I don't want to jinx it, but let's hope, right? I do think that'll happen, and in that sense, I'm very bullish on their participation in this market. But I also think a lot of new participants don't know what they're getting into. They don't know what they're buying. They're maybe, as Flaxman says, Tudor is doing, they're trying to profit off of what they perceive as some momentary thing, like a short-term opportunity to make money in dollars. And I think when the price goes up, I feel like it's those who've been hodling for generations that really deserve the congratulations. I'm not saying anybody here is suggesting otherwise, but in that sense, I'm a little bit bearish on all the new entrants. Like, y'all know that phrase, Eternal September, feels a little bit like that, right? Like, every wave, there comes a bunch of new people and making the same mistakes and saying the same things. So I actually am looking forward to having those conversations because it'll indicate that we're in good days again.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with Drew on this one. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, let me just say one thing that was really interesting about the Paul Tudor Jones thing. If you read his, it was like a press release. I got it in a chat somewhere. I think it's on the internet. He was talking about how he got interested in Bitcoin, and he was actually he basically gambled on it in 2017. He bought it from 10 and wrote it up to 20 and sold at the top on his personal account, not for his institution. And so I thought that was pretty interesting. This wasn't his first rodeo. He did it a couple years ago and got a little exposure, got the mind virus, and then when the tides change, he all of a sudden looks at it for his hedge fund, which I thought was very interesting.
When you start stacking, you never stop.
Yeah, I'm gonna agree with Drew. I think a lot of these institutional people will end up shitcoining or something to that effect eventually. They'll make lots of stupid mistakes. They'll try to not take custody of it and get screwed in some way because the futures markets will get manipulated or something like that. There's going to be some mistakes made, but that's all good eventually in the long run. But for now, I'm a little more bearish because they're going to be dropping it as soon as something. They'll probably get out after it doubles or halves either way.
Get wrecked.
This is how we get some level of stability, though, right? Is that people making these types of gambles and more people making them at different levels, and you have the options and the futures, and it's a good sign that he started by buying personally, made some money, and now he's willing to gamble his fund's money. Probably means there'll be more and more people willing to do that. It's also a signal to non-institutional people to grab in custody themselves. Just because it becomes a little bit more interesting.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that I thought was interesting about that, specifically that post, was that he specifically had a reference to the speed and rate of Fed balance sheet expansion. That he had some comment about how it's like, for even someone like me that's been in the market for a long time, seeing the rate at which they did that left me speechless. And I think that I think a lot of us who are focused on Bitcoin day to day, very much know about, the why behind it, and that a lot of it has to do with endless money printing. But I think that, one of the positives is the fact that the Fed had to do such drastic things so quickly. Just so many people are waking up and saying this doesn't make any sense, and that just leads to questions. So a lot of them will, again, I think it is a good indicator if you're owning the paper or the futures and you're not owning the physical Bitcoin and taking a bunch of counterparty risk, that you're clearly not getting something about it. But regardless, he still hit on a number of notes of the real reasons why you should own Bitcoin, and a lot of other people are too.
That was his comment, right? That Bitcoin today reminded him of the opportunity to buy gold in the 70s, I think, something along those lines.
Yeah.
Could someone explain to those of us who are less literate in this area, what does that mean? What was going on with gold in the 70s?
It's more about what was going on with the economy in the 70s, not gold specifically.
When the USD went off the gold standard,
yeah,
right? And they started to play around a lot more with the money supply.
Yeah, WTF happened in 1971.com.
Is that what he's referring to?
10% inflation.
Yeah,
There was like 10 double-digit inflation for multiple years in a row.
I mean, there were like lines for gas in the US
in Austin
in the 70s. In Austin,
famously,
oh, really?
the photos of the gas lines in Austin as Jimmy Carter's taking office is pretty rough. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think
time for
I
another
think gold.
period of inflation.
What was that, Drew?
Are we in store for another such period of inflation where assets that I won't say the word, assets that aren't inflating do better?
We're kind of seeing that right now, right? For over 10K, and the economy is kind of slowing to a halt. It's a pretty good sign. Things are the dollar is kind of losing value in some ways.
It depends on how you're denominating the asset, right? If the asset's denominated in dollars and they're printing a lot more of them, just relative to the thing they're being denominated in, it'll be worth more.
So what happened to gold? Just curious. In the 70s.
I mean, gold value went up, and of course, I think what he's alluding to there is, going off the gold standard and the inflation of the dollar, and gold being the safe haven asset against that inflation, which of course it was. And so he's looking at like a similar type of, macro event going on right now, and where's the safe haven? And I think what he's trying to say is that Bitcoin reminds him of the ability to flee to gold during that time, that inflationary period, that Bitcoin's the place to flee to.
But Bitcoin is way smaller than gold and way less ubiquitous. Like, isn't it crazy that hedge fund managers think that Bitcoin could play that same role?
I think there's an interesting question too of like, is it valuable when people regard owning Bitcoin as a fearful act? Or is it valuable when they're holding it without fear? They're holding it for the long term. Do you know what I mean? If someone embraces holding an asset class because they think it gets them out of a separate problem as compared to
right, those people are going to be weak hands. They're going to be weak hands in good times.
That's fine. We'll take their Bitcoin back when they're done with it.
Yeah, no, that's totally fine. I think
their hands are so weak they can't even hold private keys. It's like they won't even touch them.
I think the gold market, in many ways, like it's already saturated, and like central banks own how much of the gold supply. So how much?
Yo, please stop sharing.
Really expect Bitcoin to grow in relation to gold.
And just a heads up, not to interrupt, Michael. No sharing. Continue. No screen sharing.
Sorry,
anyway, Bitcoin has way more upside potential.
30x.
And there's a certain metric that compares to aspects of how much supply there is and will be that will make Bitcoin way more valuable to be holding for that purpose.
You don't have to talk around it, Michael. You can just say the word. It's okay.
I guess I can take a sip of water.
Yeah.
Are you struggling with the rule, Michael?
No, I'm just making jokes about it.
But I mean, from like a psychological level, like, doesn't this speak like an immense amount about where Bitcoin is as an asset? Like, it's tiny, but yet in the minds of seemingly the richest people in the world, it somehow is on the level of gold, which just has thousands of years of Lindy. I just think it's insane.
I mean, hedge fund managers are typically, smart and adversarial thinkers, and they're not all that way. But it doesn't surprise me that people whose job it is to spot these types of, opportunities are spotting the opportunity. And there's been hedge funders that have been into Bitcoin for a while now. So it doesn't surprise me at all that it's coming from that angle. I'm very distracted from Flaxman giving himself a massage right now.
Yeah, what the hell is he doing?
I don't know.
This
Got a
product is
Python?
just amazing. It's like anything on Amazon that has over 1,000 stars and like 4.8 or 4.9 or higher, you know it's good. But it just like hangs on your back and gives you a back massage while you're doing whatever you're doing.
This looks like an alien
It's
moving
like a
around on the back.
It just looks like a
your own
weird
arm
kind
just
of
pulling
like
down on
fashion thing. Yeah, I don't even know.
I'll give one more
Everyone in the
bullish though.
Citadel will
I'm bullish on institutional investors, not just because they can deal in the futures markets and they don't have to deal with physical Bitcoin, but if they want to, they can, right? The regulatory landscape, the ability for them to hold keys safely, like where they can be safe and actually hold their own keys. Whether it's the regulatory stuff that we all did in Wyoming or it's something like what we're doing at Unchained, like the opportunity to actually be in Bitcoin as an institution today, it looks a lot different than it did, last happening, in 2016. It's a total, the number of options people have now to do this securely on behalf of their LPs. It's a totally different game than it was last happening.
Can LPs
I'd like to do
hold their own? Wait, can LPs hold their own keys though? Because I thought there's a lot of like legal issues about like, you have to.
No, I meant
load
on
the
behalf
custodian.
of their LPs, right?
Oh, sorry.
That they'd have an easier time of holding keys and holding the physical asset of Bitcoin on behalf of their LPs in a way that their LPs would agree to. A lot more options.
We're all moving to
today.
Wyoming, right?
Come again, Brian?
We're all moving to Wyoming, right?
I'm going up in 2 weeks, man.
Brian, are you suggesting we pause the construction of the Austin Citadel for the Wyoming Citadel?
It's an interesting question. I don't know. I'm kind of conflicted here. I mean, I was born in Texas.
Yeah. I mean, those turrets were expensive to put up. They're going to be expensive to take down and move.
I'm telling you
flying-
guys,
Yeah.
you can have it both ways. They're the two greatest places on earth. You can go back and forth. I'm living proof.
Maybe not now that Bitcoin has gone back below 10,000 though.
Well, I have to go down to Lockhart first.
Yeah. What the heck, man? You said you're gonna go to Wyoming in 2 weeks. We have to do this trip like before then, and we gotta have that barbecue too. Yeah.
Yeah.
And when's the barbecue gonna happen? All right.
We'll do that next week.
We'll figure it. So this Saturday, Lockhart. Next Saturday, go and do a barbecue with all these guys.
That's right.
Yeah.
Is it time to switch?
And
to
the
next
other thing is
subject,
that look, we're at 10,000 at $20,000 Bitcoin. Everyone here, we can have two citadels. There's enough citadels to go around. One in Austin, one in Wyoming.
I mean, there's going to be thousands.
Yeah, and if we're going to switch topics here, Christian, can we do a bullish bearish on Drew's mustache, or is that the last?
No, I mean we could do whatever we want. I'm bullish. It's looking strong. And I've seen Drew's beard, so I know that that he has the power.
Also bullish.
Very bullish.
Quarantine fashion statements are going to be huge in the next few months. So
I'm bearish. I think he's going to come out. He's going to shave it all off.
I did it for the mask. I'm a big beard guy usually because it's like even less work than a mustache, and my wife likes it and all this. It works out for me. But then I read that like if you're gonna be like wearing a mask and doing all this stuff, and you probably shouldn't have a fucking beard, you idiot. And so I thought to myself, well, like, all right, this is like a cool halfway. Plus, I look like my dad in the '70s, when gold was doing really well. So that's a plus.
Coincidence?
That's your Bitcoin's going to 10x like gold did. Yeah.
So if Bitcoin goes down, it's Jimmy's fault. If Bitcoin goes up, it's because of Drew.
I don't like this arrangement. I don't know.
Dude, we just got to make a 30-minute drive. We're fine.
Yeah, how much are the hats again? I don't even remember. It's like
it's like 0.05 Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Boy.
It's a lot. It's a lot of Satoshis to give up.
Maybe not by the time they actually get there.
Well, I mean, it's a good thing I've been DCAing since Black Thursday, so yeah, not a bad.
What's the hat shop called again?
It's called Texas Hatters. He's been providing hats to all of the U.S. presidents dating back, I believe, to Jimmy Carter, actually. No, LBJ. And I think every president since then. He's got photos up everywhere, and he, just sells really nice $600 hats.
Sounds like a scammer.
600.
He just wants your Bitcoin.
They're really great hats, to be honest. Yeah.
All right.
Can't wait.
Do we want to stick on institutional investors, or should we move on to the next subject?
Next subject.
All right. This is a little off the path of Bitcoin, but still in the same trajectory. We got North American Energy. Very recently, oil prices have gone haywire. Obviously, energy in America is very important for Bitcoin mining. Are you guys bullish or bearish on North American Energy?
Bullish. Have you ever been out to Odessa? We're good in West Texas. We got enough energy forever. Yeah, we're good.
Are you going to be able to fund those operations, though? Do people want that energy?
This happens all the time, right?
Texas has some of the best power in the nation. I mean, our power grid is deregulated. I mean, you get the cheapest, best power here.
Can we expand?
Also, wind power too, right? Like wind power is like top in the world. So it's not even just reliance on a single type of energy.
Can we expand the question a little bit to talk about? It's because, in my view, it's a little bit behind the scenes of that question is another question, which is really about Bitcoin mining. And do we? I know some on this call are really bullish on the idea of North American Bitcoin mining, just in general, as an increasing world share in the world. And I think if that is true, if that vision is true, it'll absolutely be the case that we get better at energy self-sufficiency and other related areas. I'm not going to say that if it's not true, we won't do it, but I do think that if one happens, the other might happen too.
Mining could be a good reason why we continue growing our energy independence, right? Because oil prices crash and you have all this excess oil. It's pretty expensive to transport it and try to sell it, as we saw when the price went below zero. But heck, if you got some miners nearby, you can start using some of that excess wind and some of that excess oil and mine some Bitcoin, collect some of those transaction fees.
Well, that's the promise around a lot of the new mining companies looking into flared gas, mobile operations. I know Parker knows some about that.
Yeah, I mean, I had the sense, it was interesting that, our friend Gideon always says that Texas will be the Bitcoin mining capital of the world. And he always talks about not only, natural gas out in West Texas, but the wind and solar, as Buck was mentioning. But, I think that, there in one case, obviously there's a large imbalance in supply and demand in oil, and it was, really predated the global shutdown. But that ultimately it's a free market and there's price discovery. All of, the weakest producers and the highest cost producers will fail, and the strongest will thrive. And I think that, Will made a point alluding to it, but that especially when you have free markets, it's not the first time that there's been an energy boom and bust in West Texas. Like that's really ingrained in, almost the fabric of wildcatting, big risk, big return, and also, just big opportunities. So I do think that miners will increasingly, and I had a friend who's in the oil and gas space reach out to me because he was interested in Bitcoin mining economics. So I do think increasingly the energy sector is going to look at Bitcoin mining to figure out ways to make themselves more redundant. And, we'll increasingly see vertical integrations. They'll probably start out without integrations, but increasingly energy businesses themselves will figure out how to integrate with Bitcoin mining to be able to arb actual kind of sales to end consumers or businesses, and then turn it off and start Bitcoin mining. And because everybody knows there's a big peak demand and trough demand, and solving network problems is not something new. So I'm definitely bullish on North American energy, specifically West Texas energy, and Bitcoin mining.
Parker, do you have any sense of the ASIC chip manufacturing, because the two things that made China dominant for so long was they had access to subsidized energy, especially hydro in Sichuan area, but then also all the chip manufacturers were around Shenzhen. So it was so quick to get the new chips to the place where the energy was. So those would be the two things that you really need for Bitcoin efficiency. Do you have any sense of like how that would play out in Texas or in North America?
Yeah, I have less of a intelligent view, so I almost wouldn't want to opine on it. I do think that there are probably broader implications of what's going on now that's not specific to Bitcoin, where people are realizing that we can't have 90% of whatever the supply chain is coming from a single source. And so I do expect, just as a general comment, that things will localize and things will become more redundant locally. And I would just because economics are at play, I'd be surprised if there wasn't, whether it be in West Texas, whether there wasn't U.S. based chip manufacturing and mining manufacturing.
Maybe Texas Instruments should make miners.
Yeah, that'll happen in Austin.
All the chips are made by Taiwan Semiconductor. They're the ones that do all of it, and there are only like 4 or 5 global foundries. And TSMC is by far the best one. And the reason why so much of the manufacturing was in China was because Bitmain had a really good relationship with TSMC. And in fact, like all of the next gen chips are, I think, manufactured at TSMC. By the way, one random thing that I read about recently that absolutely blew my mind: the CapEx for TSMC, they manufacture chips for absolutely everybody, $15 billion. The CapEx for the amount of money that Netflix spent on original programming, $17 billion. Crazy or what?
That is crazy.
So is your argument that the market doesn't really value them, or that they're super efficient, or what do you think is going on?
Well, I mean, I don't think people realize how much chips are going to matter in this coming age of Bitcoin. So that's the main thing. But those numbers are going to change, I bet.
In what way?
In Bitcoin denominated terms.
Yeah.
No bearish views then.
How can anyone be bearish
energy?
about anything?
It's pretty difficult to be bearish about Bitcoin right now. When you look at everything else that's going on in the world and the government, how can you be bearish on Bitcoin? It's doing its thing.
How can you be bearish? How can you be bearish about energy when Bitcoin mining exists?
Exactly.
So what does
proof of stake is the future?
What is the process of energy producers, or what's the process of energy producers waking up to Bitcoin proof of work as really a utility for them, as a way for them to to sell energy that they can't sell to anyone else? How long does that take?
I think a big part of it is days like today. The price has got to get fantastically larger. As we were just commenting previously, Bitcoin is so small, yet it's got the attention of so many. It wouldn't be realistic today for the energy industry in meaningful terms to offload into Bitcoin in any way. It's too small. But hey, that could change very quickly. In fact, it has changed very quickly in the past. And again, on days like today, it's easy to envision a world where it changes meaningfully in the future. I would say beyond all the other things, there has to be room enough for them to win something out of it, because they're not going to run experiments. I think startups can run experiments and play at being both miners and energy providers. But the really big players need the market to be much larger before they're willing to take the reputational risk of even trying.
Yeah, I do think that's a good point. That the overall size of Bitcoin today on the mining side relative to whether it's E&P companies or actual power production, it still is relatively small. But I mean, as we see with the flare miners, everywhere that they're operating on the site of an oil and gas company, and some oil and gas companies having to agree to host those miners on those facilities. So it's clear to me that the oil and gas sector is already paying attention. That market forces, I think, as Drew said, will dictate that as the opportunity gets larger. Because I think one of the other funny things is people always talk about how Bitcoin mining wastes energy. And then here you have all these energy producers that have so much excess energy. And wouldn't they love to be able to pipe it into to a direct monetization path? And so I do think that people are waking up to that fact. And that they're also seeing, if nothing else, that the price of oil, obviously the going to zero was a technical detail, but price of oil, even where it's at today, is down 50% from 2 or 3 months ago. And recognizing that, yes, while Bitcoin's volatile, it's already through where it was on March 12th, and that there actually is a lot more to it than that. It's like essentially less volatile than gold, or sorry, less volatile than oil right now. So increasingly, though, people already are paying attention, and they will increasingly.
I think you'd be hard pressed to find anyone who's deep in the energy industry, from wildcatters to people that build substations and things like that, that aren't aware of Bitcoin and aren't thinking about their place in that world. When we do the events in Wyoming, there are lots of people from the energy industry there. They're especially, in places up there where they don't have any access to pipelines or anything like that for natural gas. They're flaring everything. They're very interested in people that are South Dakota, North Dakota, Wyoming. Those places are really interested in the mobile miners, those types of things.
Interesting idea. I think that could be a way to raise capital for a larger energy production like facility, right? Like you just start mining. You don't have to transport that energy anywhere. You don't have to have the cables going to your wind turbines or the pipelines that are transporting your oil out. You use that. You can start earning capital enough to actually raise the funds to create the facilities that make it useful in other capacities, right? It could be just like a new fundraising mechanism.
So I actually have a thought on that. I've been thinking about this. I remember listening to it was Steve Barber on Marty Bent's podcast, and he said that he doesn't think that green energy will be big for Bitcoin. And while I kind of get that angle, I actually think the opposite will be true. Bitcoin will be huge for green energy because it will allow these energy producers that are really kind of not getting consistent energy to continue to build and develop their facilities because they can monetize them with Bitcoin.
Yeah, one of the largest problems with solar and wind today is curtailment, which is shutting off production. So for wind, I know I was kind of researching this in 2018. They had to curtail production about 17% of the time. And when you have a network that will literally buy every drop of electricity you give to it, as long as you have ASIC chips, like that's a huge amount of revenue and profit really that they were missing out on. So I think, if this renewable energy stuff pans out, I think ASICs will be basically a requirement to make it profitable.
At least in the like short run, right? Like it's possible when you get to a certain scale, the economies of scale makes sense that you can be profitable anyway. But that's actually an interesting like kind of pro green energy argument, is that it allows you to get to that scale, right? Because you can be mining at the lower end too. So I think that's an interesting aspect of it.
See you, Brian.
Do you think, just calling back to a prior comment someone had made about distribution and current pandemics, it's like, do you think that the market will change the way that they value certain, like the concept of homemade certain resources? Like we have a lot of protections in America for various industries. They're meant to encourage or discourage certain things that we think or that people who have been bought to think want things to work, but if the market changes in a meaningful way, such that, for example, manufacturing and energy in certain ways here in America is more profitable and starts to locate here more, that could be, I feel like there's a feedback with that and mining and green energy technologies together. It's hard to predict how it actually goes, but one can imagine a world where those drivers feed off of each other to create a lot of harvesting of energy all over the place.
I can make a prediction on that for you, Drew. We will make steel in Ohio and in Pennsylvania again. Absolutely.
Really? You think so?
Yeah.
Well, it's going to be machines
I'm not
making
sure
the steel.
the economics work right now with fiat money, but once Bitcoin takes over, that would make sense. But right now, there has to be a trade deficit because we're on the dollar standard, and that means that like a lot of the manufacturing happens offshore, happens in China and other places. So I don't know if industries like steel come back. I mean, that's a very heavy industry, a lot of capex involved and things like that.
We will make things here. We will store things here. I think that our just-in-time warehousing will change to greater stockpiles. I think that there will be another industrial boom here after all this is said and done. I think it'll be both sort of from the corporate side and from a political side an untenable position to have core competencies outsourced in that way. I think that we've been hit pretty hard by this, and something good has to come of it, and I think that they'll be bringing that work back here.
Chamath kind of talked about this in his interview with Pomp. He was saying that in order to save America, we have to become more inefficient, and I guess in this case, more redundant. We need to localize things, for the sake of being more resilient rather than for just pure efficiency, which is kind of what we've been optimizing for the past 20 so years. What do you guys think of that comment?
I think of I read this book called Strong Towns recently, and it was really interesting because it kind of came out early on in the book and just said like almost all cities in the US are bankrupt, right? Like we're all leveraged, we're all in debt, or every city is rather. And they recommended kind of the same thing. Like you have to start small and grow organically. And we've gotten so far away from that in the US and with the fiat economy. I think Bitcoin is kind of teaching us that decentralization, while individually, it creates individual fragile pieces, but as a system is much more robust overall. So, I kind of see that we're going to decentralize production a little bit more and go back to more of a local scenario. I kind of agree with Will. I think we'll do more production here in the US and at a local area or in a local level.
Is there a cultural parallel to that idea? Like something that I've noticed recently is a lot of people in my generation, whatever that is, are like into like crafty making shit stuff like woodworking or like, other kinds of activity that are like about creating stuff in the real world, like manufacturing things or designing or building something. And part of it, I've always wondered like how much of that is like guilt or like running away from our high-tech jobs and feeling like we don't produce anything really valuable like chairs and trying to like make up for it on the weekends. And I wonder how much of it is like some kind of Jungian, unacknowledged like psychology thing where we're as a generation realizing that we're going to be, as Will says, manufacturing steel in Pennsylvania and we better get prepared for it. It could be neither of those things, but
be both too. All
sure.
the above.
We need sound money for that.
Take one from the team, Parker.
I mean, we could see a lot more of that coming out after all of this, right? Because people are like picking up new skills, learning how to make things at home. Like I'm trying to grow my own vegetables and it's ridiculous how difficult and complicated it is. Like caterpillars eating my eggplants, those types of things. But at the other end, you come out with a new skill. And I bet there could be a lot more people, a lot of people that come out of it doing stuff like what you're talking about, building stuff and picking up new skills. And who knows what that turns into.
It's also, it's just a frame of mind, right? It's like, in 1997, we wanted to pay, $14.99 for a DVD player or a CD-ROM instead of $24.99, and we gave up Detroit. Like, I think this kind of lands that that thought that like the boil the
Detroit
frog
gave up
approach
itself. Detroit gave up itself.
You're missing my point, though.
In the U.S., car manufacturing in the U.S. just moved to the South, where
Austin loves
laws
Detroit.
and all that were not as twisted.
You're missing the point, Buck. That's I'm not literally replace Detroit with Pittsburgh, right? Is that this idea that that we got those cheaper CD-ROMs in 1997, and that was worth losing Pittsburgh over, or that was worth losing Detroit over, that was worth losing any of the steel belt manufacturing centers. I think when we couple that with what we're noticing right now about the strategic risks of not producing these things ourselves, that it puts that into perspective. Like,
people have to be willing
that it wasn't worth it
to pay more for that, though, which after this they might be. But Pittsburgh's an interesting example because they lost the steel industry, but now they're like one of the leading centers for medical device and medical research in the world, which is a good thing, right? Like, sometimes you want those types of transitions.
I think
and
you're
it's good that in the U.S. we allow for that. I think
that's fine. Yeah, my point wasn't the individual city. It was more of the point of the outsourcing of all of these goods into cheaper labor markets was probably not a wise trade to make.
As Bitcoiners, we should probably all be pretty comfortable with the idea of. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Well, my point with the individual cities is like, we gave that up, but you have to be willing to kind of like, if we hadn't given that up, then we don't get the kind of innovation that Pittsburgh eventually gave us somewhere else, right? And so that's just specialization, right? That's it's specialization. So I don't know. Sometimes you need to, if you want that, you need to force people from the top down to say, hey, no, you guys have to be willing to accept more expensive goods for both long-term benefits. I don't know if this is right.
Don't fight against economics. Don't fight against individual incentives.
Economics dictated that those things do move away from those cities.
Fiat economics, maybe. I don't know. Again, like, it seems like there's a trend that is shifting. First it was efficiency, now it's like resilience, right? All these people are seeing how dangerous it is to have the concentration of production in China, or even the concentration of production of food and stuff like that in specific farms, in our country. I think that, people are going to see value in redundancy, and it's on theme with Bitcoin.
That's a great point. That's something I was just about to say, is that, like, as Bitcoiners, we should be very comfortable with this idea of being inefficient at certain things that other people value in order to deliver, like, way, way overboard on other things that no one else is thinking to value. I think it's always a discussion, right? In our community, whether it's about transaction sizes or speeds or volumes, block sizes, or whether we're talking about like investing in an industry or protecting it versus letting it die. There's always this like back and forth between like, do we want to push ourselves to ignore the fact that it would be more efficient to do it this other way, or do we want to allow ourselves to take advantage of that and allow something to die, allow something to change, maybe, as Buck is saying. It's imperfect to know the answer.
So what is the future?
Yeah, I have suspect that the reason.
Jimmy, go for it.
Basically what we were saying is that, like, a lot of the manufacturing is gone from the U.S. It might be because of the U.S. dollar, because all of these like inefficient giant manufacturers got subsidized for so long. And maybe the ones in China and these other places got a leg up because they came afterwards and they weren't zombie companies when they produced them. I'm not sure how accurate.
They're also heavily subsidized.
I suspect that there's some truth of it. Yeah, I mean, they might be. But I mean, regardless, they're far more efficient than, say, GM or GE or one of those like
car manufacturing is super interesting, right? It's super interesting because for like what you're saying is exactly what happened in U.S. car manufacturing where it actually didn't all go abroad. It's just the car companies that were locked into Detroit, they fell behind, but a lot of Japanese manufacturing moved to the Southeast. So we still have a lot of car manufacturing in the U.S., but the best car manufacturing happened. Yeah, South Carolina, Tennessee. So, that a lot of that was exactly what you're saying, Jimmy. It's just like we had these protections that made us less efficient, became these zombie companies. We didn't have to be that way.
Yeah, I suspect most of this is due to fiat in one way or another. And there is sort of like an imbalance of trade that needs to exist because the U.S. is on the dollar. I mean, the rest of the world is on the dollar standard. So, I mean, that's probably why a lot of the manufacturing is happening overseas. But regardless of that, I'm still skeptical that a lot of the manufacturing will move back to the States. I mean, you have a lot of, a lot of that kind of labor is already like in huge shortage in the U.S., right? You can't find enough welders, for example. I can't imagine there'd be that many people willing to go work at factories at this point. The culture is just so different now, and most people want a desk job at an office somewhere instead of. But
Jimmy, isn't that
the plot?
Isn't it the plot of Office Space that a bunch of people of our generation are willing to just go outside and enjoy the fucking sun, man?
I don't know. I mean, that's the fantasy. I don't know if that's reality. Like there's a lot of people that
one guy
that say they want that, but you look at the jobs they apply to, and it's totally not like that. I like there's only something
one out of the
like
three that took that outside job.
Yeah, which is true. I mean, it's people like rent seeking, and a lot of office jobs, let's face it, are rent seeking jobs, and it's a lot easier to do those than like actually put your back into something and actually have to build something. So it's very, very, very different. And
we're forecasting for the Bitcoin world, though.
Yeah.
I
don't know. Like, what does that transition look like? Like, is
Great
it?
question.
Are people going to actually like transition into, I guess, what you would consider maybe like lower class jobs, right? Like they might pay very well. I mean, being an electrician right now, you can get paid bank. But like, it's considered a low class job. So not a lot of people go into it. They'd rather be a postdoc at a university, get paid like a quarter of the amount, which is completely irrational, but that's just how the culture is. I mean, like, do you change that? How do you like, how does that change? I'm not even sure that changes anytime soon,
Do you guys believe it's changing because of what's happening now? Are we going to be meaningfully affected by this period? Or are we going to go back to how it was? I'm not advocating what we should do. I'm just asking a question.
There was that graphic Coinbase, right? That like the number of purchases and the exact amount of the stimulus checks that just spiked right around the time when the checks all went out. Like that's how you could see the transition happening. It's like, oh, you're giving me these US dollars. I'm going to convert them into something that will be valuable in 5 to 10 years. That's how you transition a little bit out of US dollars.
Yeah, there's an incredible Twitter bot.
I totally want to see hyper Bitcoinization, but I don't know, like if it's going to happen. Like that doesn't speak to the cultural transformation that we're talking about. That's a completely different thing.
But doesn't Bitcoin change us
from necessity, right?
Parker.
Well, I think that if you change away from having them print money and give it away and that becoming worthless, people are gonna like, okay, well, I need a way to actually feed my family, right? And if you're earning Bitcoin instead of free US dollars, maybe that becomes the way. And then maybe you actually need to do real work.
I don't think anyone's disputing that that's the way it'll be eventually. It's just during the transition. I don't know how long that takes.
Has anyone been thinking about what transition looks like?
About like what's going on now.
Sorry, Buck. Has anyone been thinking about what transition looks like? Michael, you haven't spoken in a while. Have you been thinking about this at all?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing I struggle with is how do we see the first nation state buy Bitcoin? And I think that like once one does it, it's such a domino rally. And it won't be, the US would be the last country to do that. But
Flax, don't some of them mine
I could
right now?
see. What's that?
Don't some of them mine right now? Don't some countries mine Bitcoin like I've heard North Korea or other?
Who?
It's
No,
sort of playing
not as a government
Korea
thing. They
might.
allow mining. Those are different things.
They allow and confiscate.
I mean, there's reports that like Venezuelan police who take your mining equipment then run it themselves, not for the government, but I don't know that that's true or not. It certainly seems plausible. You have sovereign wealth funds that might hold Bitcoin. I think that's like a real path. But you have to think of the political process inside a country that makes them decide that decision. And I kind of think it has to be a dictatorship, because then it's just somebody wants to do something. There's a committee of one. They might want to do it for benevolent reasons because they think it's the right thing for their country. They might want to do it for practical reasons because they think they're going to be able to turn their country's finances around. But you need a decision maker that's a committee of one, I think. I think outside of that, it becomes really hard to make that decision because there's so much downside to that individual and no upside when they're doing that decision making. The expression is
I really like that
fired
idea.
for. There's that expression like nobody ever got fired for picking Oracle. It's like you can definitely get fired for picking Bitcoin. That's you will. That's for sure. But if you're an unfireable dictator, maybe some really teeny country starts experimenting with it, and that sort of begins the domino rally.
I really like this idea.
Like, how do we go from beyond hobbyist gold?
I want to ask you to call your shot. Top 3 countries like that.
I don't know. That's like the best story I can come up with, but it's a stretch. It's like, and they're personally maybe holding a ton of Bitcoin and like front running that announcement, and so they're profiting off of it. Because it makes so much sense in a world where one country does it, then like more and more countries do it, and then it becomes very obvious. But how does that first country hold it in their central bank, not in their sovereign wealth fund? Maybe their sovereign wealth fund just performs so well, they like replace the central bank. They just say, oh, look, we have more money than you do. Oops. Maybe. But I think like in any democracy, people start clamoring for that money. They're like, oh, we have this surplus. Spend it. We want stuff. Only a dictator can just say no.
I want to hear from Justin. Justin, it's been a minute for you. Any thoughts on this subject?
Well, I'm over here Googling North Korea. I've read stories about how they have like some sort of like hacking, like they're suspecting a lot of like exchange hacks. So I mean that would kind of conform to what Michael's saying. One decision maker, and them, heavily sanctioned. So I don't know if the world knows yet, but they could already be in this place.
That's an interesting way of accumulating it too, right? It's like you don't have to convince your citizens that it's the right thing to buy it. You're getting it illicitly through hacking or the like hostage schemes.
Jimmy, you probably know a lot more about.
I put my money on, there are sovereign wealth funds that we know have Bitcoin already. But I think in the U.S. that's where we'll start too. We have 3 states with their own sovereign wealth funds: New Mexico, Alaska, and Wyoming. And I'll put my money on Wyoming. Like when Wyoming becomes the richest state in the United States because of the Bitcoin that they put into their sovereign wealth fund, then I think that the United States will be in good shape. It will look a lot more like Wyoming.
Jimmy, probably more about North Korea than anyone in this group. I'm curious what weight you put in the claims of their like hacking abilities. You see like the Sony hack was credited that North Korea was able to get all that personal information from their email server. And I always just wonder, in a country where literacy rates are low, there's no culture of hacking and breaking things. There's like strict obedience to authority. Do they actually have talented hackers that could pull off these types of heists?
Yeah, when your life is on the line, you become a really good hacker. And if that's all you do all day, every day, and and they demand that you get it done. Yeah, you find a way to get it done. It's amazing what motivation you can find when your life is in danger and your family's life is in danger and your unborn grandchildren are in danger. So I suspect that they have some pretty talented hackers, and they have relationships with Russia and China. So it's not like they don't have it's not like they lack good teachers to teach them. So I from what I understand, they did hack at least a few South Korean exchanges and have some Bitcoin as a result of that. Now they tried to launder it through China, and I think a couple of them are some of those funds got seized, but there's plenty more that hasn't. So, I mean, they might be the first sovereign nation that has or actually owns Bitcoin, but who knows? It's hard to say whether that's going to be the major transition point. For me, it feels to me that's a little further away. The thing that I think I'm waiting for are like more consumerish people, like in third world countries or something like that. As dollars become more and more scarce, they transition more to Bitcoin as a way to hedge against their own currency and their own inflation. That seems much more plausible to me as a transition.
Michael, I don't know if you'll take this as a positive or negative on the abilities of the North Korean hackers, but I can say as of 2015 in my former life, I was working at Stack Overflow, that Stack Overflow was the #1 most visited website in North Korea. So,
whoa, that's wild.
Now they don't have access to many websites. I had to start with that, but they did.
Will,
we're calling that your fiat career now.
Your fiat career, I like that. But one more thing to talk about is like, is it actually hard to hack the PlayStation Network? I don't know. I think it may just be the case that many computer networks are just insecure, and it's a little bit, is someone willing to fucking do this? And North Korea is like, yes, we are.
All right, guys, I think we're drifting a little off the topic of North American energy, so it might be a good time to change subjects. Bullish or bearish on ending the shutdown?
Bullish. Very bullish. I want to end it right now.
At what level, though, is the question, right?
Well, yeah, it's like are they going to... It doesn't matter what you want. It's what is going to happen.
Wait, here, guys, I got a funny story.
Texas is going to end faster, I think, than like New York.
So I got a funny story. I take full credit for this. I think most people saw yesterday, there were tweets going around of the woman who got put in jail because she was cutting hair. She had her salon open. That pissed me off so much. I immediately go to my, pull up Governor Abbott's, contact information. I'm like, this is un-American. You're, considering some people essential, some people non-essential. It's bullshit. We're going to get you out of office. This is ridiculous. Like 2 hours later, a guy puts out a statement like, this is ridiculous. It's un-American. Like he was basically just lifted my exact letter to him. And then the lieutenant governor
too? It's clearly gradually been said.
They got her out of jail. They got her out of jail today because the Supreme Court basically put a stay in. So
Parker, you got to be careful how you wield your power, man.
Yeah, I can't take
full
credit.
Didn't the lieutenant governor even offer to do the jail time for her or something?
Yeah, the problem is you can't do it for 10 people. You can only do jail time once. At the same time, they put the letters out, but it's like, this was your order that caused this, So, but I'm
definitely more pissed off at Austin city government because they're extending the lockout. Yeah. Sorry, Flax, you want to go?
No, it's fine. But I'm wondering what y'all think is going to happen with the counts, because we have more coronavirus cases when the lockdown ended. Well, ended. We're in a weird pseudo ending, phase 1, but we reopened things with more cases than we had when we started the lockdown. So I'm predicting that we're going to see a huge second wave. And I'm not saying that that's a government problem, but I think it's going to be chaos.
I'm bullish on it because I think that people that, I think that the governors nationwide are going to come under more and more pressure. I mean, people can't stay inside forever, Again, was getting the cheap CD-ROMs worth losing all these great American cities? Like, are we going to do it again right now? Like, absolutely not. And the people who are healthy enough to go out and work should. And the people who either don't want to or aren't healthy enough to do so shouldn't. And the governors, I think, are going to do the right thing here and allow that to happen. Which does mean that some people will get sick, Michael. Like, I agree with that. But I also, I think that as more data comes out and we see that it's been in the United States for longer and longer periods of time, and that the, fatality rates for younger individuals with non-compromised immune systems and things like that comes out, that it's exceedingly low, that that there will be increasing pressure on the governors, and I think they'll do the right thing.
This is a question of what the second wave could look like if you didn't start opening up a little bit earlier, right? So we would have increased numbers earlier now, but then second wave hitting would be less impactful. Also, I think the human cost of extended lockdowns is going to be astronomical in some places.
I'm trying to get Justin to go play golf on Saturday. Got to go. Safe keeps telling me on Twitter that we need to get vitamin D, and so what better way to get some vitamin D? Go play some golf.
We got one spot left in the foursome. If anyone wants to join.
Yeah, which one of you guys wants to play?
Golf courses in California are opening, so even in California, things are starting to open up. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I saw a tweet the other day. It said that spiritually this lockout is over. Like people have moved on. They're out of their houses. And you could kind of feel the energy, at least here in Austin. Like I was at Costco today. I went to a steakhouse for lunch with my wife. You can feel the traffic. First of all, when you're driving, you can see more cars on the road. You can also see a lot more people. There are less people wearing masks. There's a lot more people just doing stuff. And it feels to me that it's sort of like the momentum is already there. And whatever rules that people are going to put, it's going to be seen as like, what, dude, why are you getting in the way? Right. Like it's like any politician knows if you get in the way of a lot of people that want to do something, you're going to get killed. And I think that's how it's going to play out. There's going to be a lot of politicians that try. They're going to give up their careers for it, is my guess.
I mean, if you look at the politicians in New York, though, Cuomo and de Blasio, Cuomo's at 80% approval, and he's saying that they're not going to commit to any timeline, even a conditional timeline for thinking about reopening. And
remember George W. Bush's approval rate right after the Iraq War launch? Yeah, it was around 80% too. Nobody remembers this shit when election time comes. It's the after effects that matter, and that's what's going to happen with this too. Your approval rating right now matters for nothing. The only thing that matters is how people perceive the event, like when the election time happens. So I don't think those two politicians are going to do very well. Well, I mean, they might because they're in a very liberal state. Who knows?
That's what I think.
I think the real thing. I want to hear from Flax, because I think Flax has a view that's probably different than particularly mine and Jimmy's. But if we didn't start to unlock, what would the scenario be, or what would the path be, or what would be the defense for keeping things locked down for longer?
Yeah, I don't think we should lock down. I think it's people's private, personal decisions. It's not the government's business. But I'm also not cheering people getting back out there because I think the next wave is going to be really bad. Not for us. Nobody on this call. We're all super low risk. I'm not worried that any of us are going to have any serious risk of death. We're all young and we're all healthy. But I think once those death numbers go up, I mean, we've had 70,000 people die. That's 20 9/11s. You know that people are going to react very, very strongly to that. And it's not like
you do realize they're a little bit doctored, right? Just
those are juice stats.
Because the federal government pays 15% more for COVID deaths than anything else. I'll go get my water and drink it in a bit. But yeah.
Yeah, but even if they're off by a factor of 2, I mean, we're still at the beginning of the death count. It's just really big numbers.
There was also like a problem with the way that we handled nursing homes and stuff, which would hopefully be different. Like you're saying, like we're not at risk, but hopefully we handle the at-risk groups a lot better as we start to open up.
And also, I should qualify our at-riskness. We're not at risk for death. The military is now making the default position that if you've recovered from COVID, you're not eligible to enlist. So that's a little scary. I think they'll reverse that policy.
Why? Because
that's
the
a new one.
respiratory damage?
Hey guys,
Yeah,
we're
diminished lung
back
capacity.
over 10. Will and Jimmy, you guys need to get to Lockhart. We're back over 10.
No, it's back down. Well, it's back up again. It's really, literally floating right around 10 right now.
10.00 right now.
That's what I was saying. Should have been
Here's the bigger
50
question
every
on this,
time we went up
Flaxman.
and below 10,000.
5 digits feels so good.
How did we allow Sweden to out America us?
Hasn't Sweden been doing it for a while?
Shameful.
You got Greta.
Shameful.
As long as you're not morbidly obese, I think you'll be okay with this. But I don't know. That seems to be the main comorbidity is some sort of metabolic condition. That seems to be the main type of people that die. So, yeah.
So
which actually maybe proves Michael's point. It probably makes America probably the worst country for that sort of thing.
Which is an interesting part of the statistic. A lot of people talk about the reason being our lack of preparedness and all that, but actually it could just be because we're a lot more unhealthy.
There's so many other weird things. Like I think there's 3 states in the Eastern Seaboard, like New York, New Jersey, and maybe Massachusetts, that account for something like 11% of the population, but 50% of the deaths. There's all kinds of weird things like that.
If you take out the New York City tri-state area, the mortality rate in the U.S. looks actually better than Germany right now, with a much higher population.
Yeah, so it's weird how it seems to attack little areas and
Isn't
that
that
very irresponsible government?
fundamentally what's challenging about this kind of an issue from a governance perspective, from a political, from just even a personal perspective? It's simply not the case that it's the same for all of us. It's very different. If you live in a tiny county where there are no cases and no one's likely to visit and no one's sick, why are you under the same rules as someone that's in an international city that receives constant global visitors that almost certainly will encounter these kinds of things much more quickly? It feels like we're running into a huge impedance mismatch between like the sort of chunky geographical structures we use to govern ourselves and like the very fluid dynamical network structures that actually describe the way we transmit diseases amongst our society. I haven't heard any good solutions that talk about how we can fairly, dynamically, while preserving the choice of individuals, still encourage and tamp down on transmissivity in places where it's happening, without like crushing the economic activity of everybody just stupidly across the board at the same time. It's a very challenging problem.
You're going to laugh, Drew, but the federalist system is how we solve that. I mean, it's explicitly for purposes like that, right?
Sure, but we have like, what is that federal system? We have like 2 levels to it, right? That's it. We gave up at that level of federalization. Like we didn't. Think
So Abbott, at least the way he's managing it in Texas, I'm not that familiar with in other places. He's giving some leeway to different counties and municipalities and how they're going to deal with it. So we have other levels. It's just at the state level, then you start deciding how much more federalization you want to do at that level. So you don't determine that at the national level. You determine at the national level we have a separation between the states and the national government, and then once you get to the state level, you determine how you want to split that up further.
I think there's a good time to switch to the next bearish or bullish. Right now we have it written as bearish or bullish on Citadels, but I want to amend it to bearish or bullish on Citadels in the next decade.
Is there a working definition for Citadel we can all use to argue over?
Just like a really sweet house.
Really?
A fortified position where you can self-sufficiently provide for yourself within the Citadel and the lands around the Citadel.
Do you pay taxes to anybody?
Does it have something to do with Bitcoin? I feel like this is a very Bitcoin idea.
Yeah, wait, do you pay taxes to anybody?
That's the key question here.
No, your serfs pay taxes to you.
I think
Really, we're talking
Kanye's
about
got a pretty
seasteading.
sweet. Kanye's got a pretty sweet citadel in Wyoming. Maybe we should start there because that sounds like a really awesome citadel. And if he's already doing it, then like
Kanye
in the next decade. Kanye.
Does Kanye have
He's got
Bitcoin?
a citadel. Kanye's got a citadel in Wyoming. Total citadel. Like maybe that's the definition. Is your citadel as good as Kanye?
Yeah, Kanye's the the mark that we have to hit here.
Yeah.
I mean,
Still paying federal taxes though, right?
Of course, yeah. You're still paying taxes. I mean, the idea is getting into the most friendly jurisdiction possible, right? So citadels in the next 10 years in the United States, I think as it relates to Bitcoin, I think that's what we're seeing in Wyoming happen, is the ability for people to start businesses and individually transact in Bitcoin in ways that they couldn't do. You know, the whole point of what Wyoming's doing right now is they're selling sovereignty. They're selling the most attractive jurisdiction to be a Bitcoin business or a individual who holds Bitcoin on the planet. And they're they're actively combating other jurisdictions to do so. So in the next 10 years, like absolutely. And I think in the US, it'll happen in the West specifically, not just Wyoming, but the Western states in general are capable of writing that legislation and leading the way and don't have as many ingrained interests as the coasts do. And I'm very bullish on that. We can get into, I think it'll be fun getting into all the other non-Bitcoin things. You need guns and you need cattle and you need farming and you need all sorts of things going as well. You need, I think most importantly, you need water with alligators. But no, I mean
So Florida.
I think the United States is really well positioned to be the best jurisdiction on the planet because of what's happening in places Wyoming for you to have a Bitcoin business or be an individual who holds Bitcoin.
Federalism.
I'm less optimistic than that, mostly because of at the federal level, it's like you have the Fed, right? You have the dollar hegemony. You have dollar standard all over the world. I don't think they're gonna want to. They can, as we've seen with like marijuana laws, especially, they can interfere with state level things if they want to through the monetary system specifically. And I think
and how many of the states that have
hey guys, I'm gonna take one for
marijuana?
the team, but stock to flow model says the dollar is getting broken in the next 10 years. So 10 years.
Cheers to that.
Timeline.
Let's all drink to that.
Talk.
But I don't know. When I hear the word Citadel, I just kind of like, now I haven't read the book Strong Towns, but I just kind of associate it with, will there be a rebirth of, vibrant towns that, are much more, I don't know what the right term is, not effective, but to just like have a lot more soul and culture than a lot of kind of what's happened over the last 40 years. So maybe when I hear, maybe people are more literal when they say Citadel, and I'm not, I'm not the expert on Citadels here, but I can see people like, if you just think about like, where do the Bitcoin live in what cities, and then what do those cities look like relative to cities that don't have a lot of Bitcoin? I'm guessing that the cities that have people that have Bitcoin, those cities are going to look a lot better and more livable and vibrant than those that don't have a lot of people in there that have Bitcoin.
Definitely bullish on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think like the way that I see the citadels kind of emerging is somewhat similar to a lot of the cities that you find in Europe that emerge under the gold standard, right? So they're all just like so much more livable and walkable They emerged naturally. There wasn't a lot of city planning and the grid structure that we have in the U.S. So yeah, I kind of think of a citadel as just like much more contained and local cities that are just very strong and like good solid communities. But then on a personal level, for my citadel, all I can think about is just how awesome I'm going to make my bathroom. So 2-story shower.
Bathroom.
My bathroom.
Japanese
Yeah.
toilets.
I have a two-story shower. So Kanye doesn't have a 2-story shower. Gonna have like a hammam, steam room, bathroom DJ, stuff like that.
So one thing that's interesting
I've
that y'all.
talked to Bitstein about, going out on like the Llano River or the Nueces River, find the big, like not big, but couple 100-acre, start parceling it up amongst us. We just need the river, we need good water. That'll be our own citadel. That sounds pretty good to me.
I'm taking an RV out on the Llano this weekend. Do a little scouting. Yeah.
Nice.
Hashtag van life.
Yeah, this is a very big van. It's like 7, but yeah.
What's interesting is like I
Mobile
feel
citadel.
I feel like I had always, when I had heard citadel, y'all have educated me just now. I had always thought of it as like it's a family or like a small group of people, and some of you are describing it like it's a town. And so I have an like how many people live in a citadel? Does one suppose? Is it like a family size unit, or is it a Dunbar's number? Is it a
multi-sig contract?
You can have your family compound within the citadel. No, but
do the elders hold Bitcoin in multi-sig? Like, how does that work?
real question.
Of course, they wouldn't be elders if they didn't have multi-sig. You won't last that long without it.
Like Shamir sharing their key, or is it?
No, I mean, I think of it more in like the localism terms, right? And what Parker was saying about the cities and towns and individuals in different jurisdictions that have Bitcoin and the thriving that they go through will define, what the other people are trying to replicate, right? And I think that that's why we have a really huge advantage in the United States is that, to Jimmy's point, that the feds are messing with states that are legalizing marijuana, but how many of those states that have legalized it have reverse course, right? None of them, 0. And in fact, it's just growing. And I think that, the states, when you walk into, I've learned a lot about this over the last year, is when you walk into like a state legislative group and you're watching, the Democrats and Republicans or in any committee, doesn't matter, whether they're in California or Wyoming, they all believe in states' rights. They take their own sovereignty very seriously, and that the states are sovereign in the United States. They do get to make a lot of their own rules. They do try to avoid preemption from the federal government. They negotiate with the government before they pass a lot of these laws, like we did in Wyoming. And because of the way our system is set up, I feel, even if the United States at large does not make a huge overt gesture towards being a friendly jurisdiction, there will be places in the United States that are taking this very seriously, and that are comparing themselves not necessarily to New York, which is the worst possible place to be a Bitcoin business at this point, but comparing themselves to Monaco, British Virgin Islands. They're going to try to beat them at their game there. And we're very fortunate to have access to that because in order to get to one of those places, all we have to do is hop in a car.
I think that's what'll be interesting as things start to open up as well in some places and not in others, right? Is that if there are more employment opportunities or things are looking a little bit more open, there's a little bit less regulation, people are going to be forced to move to some place where they can get a job, where they can get food, where the supply, where in Texas, they're making a lot more of their own food. And so those supply chains won't be as disrupted. And so if people start moving around, they'll be moving out of the very large, very dense cities like New York City or San Francisco, or LA is not as dense, but still quite large, to places that are more affordable, that are opened up a little bit more. And then to see economically how those develop. And if you're creating new industries via mining, to go back to the prior conversation, or the regulatory environment, like what Wyoming's doing, that could create a lot more opportunities too.
I just want to make my own compound somewhere in like the Mountain West states, just like 5-10 acres, nice house, lots of bedrooms, really good internet access, a river, maybe some cattle. I think that's what a citadel means to me. And if I'm an example, or if I'm representative of other Bitcoin OGs, I think there will be many such things. And
will you be mining there too?
No.
Yeah, that was going to be my question is how much does mining and like being near an energy source have to do with like where these city-state citadel communities pop up?
And the electrical grid's pretty good, and they already have ways to connect you to the electrical grid pretty easily. And if not, you can always do renewables or generators and all sorts of things like that. There's plenty of options for that, I think.
I think also as long as you're on Earth, you're closest to the center of hash.
I was just gonna say that.
So I don't think that you need to be near mining. You need to have connectivity to be able to send Bitcoin. But I don't think you need to be close to mining hash power.
Gotta watch out for those 5G towers though, right?
And I think Drew tried to build his own cabin in the woods once, or had ideas of it.
I like that you called him out for tried to.
Bill's under construction.
I didn't finish it. There were some regressions and various other complaints from stakeholders, and the project. It's very
Bitcoin 100K. That cabin's getting.
It's gonna get done,
up.
Dude. I will.
Bitcoin 1 million. That's what we're waiting for.
You're right. I'm lucky enough in my short life so far to own some land, and I have built a house on that land. It's in the mountains, and it is beautiful. And it is. If there were a citadel, that one's mine. Except I didn't do a good enough job to flee to it during COVID-19. And so here I am, and my entire fucking family is making fun of me. They're like, so remember that time you bought that thing and you built all that stuff, and then the pandemic happened and people turned into zombies, and then you stayed in your tiny apartment in downtown Austin so you could keep living your life where you work at a company and don't run through the mountains with the wind running through your hair and whatever else it is you thought you were doing. And then I think they're very satisfied. These people are very satisfied in my failure, I must say.
Well, just wait till Starlink.
Look at that
Starlink's going to hit your place pretty early. It's going to be in the northern U.S. and Canada, and you'll have.
There is definitely a homeless family living in my house right now, which is the only thing I have going for me is that at least someone's using it.
Drew, if you need a drink.
Does Colorado have the squatter laws too, where if they live there for 7 years, it's just theirs now?
I need to go back and ask them. They've signed.
Well, you got to evict them, is what you got to do. That's gonna be fun.
That's so funny.
Add it to the backlog, Groove.
Yeah, maybe I'll go for like a private jet eventually. I don't know. That'll be a nice place to live too.
All right. Anyone last words on citadels? All right, and now we're moving on to topics. First and foremost, the halving. Priced in, question mark?
Only for people that already hold Bitcoin.
I agree with that.
I mean, one thing that's exciting, and you see it in Paul Tudor Jones, but I'm seeing it in conversations about Bitcoin generally, is that outsiders and like crypto people kind of all agree what Bitcoin is now. Like the theme you hear over and over again is that it's the scarcest thing. And people get that, and that's awesome.
It's cool that took hold.
Yeah. And that it happened naturally, right? There's no CEO of Bitcoin that's like propagating that message and putting out press releases.
Oh, I thought that was
I still talk to plenty of pre-coiners who say that doesn't matter. And you can debate whether you think being scarce matters or not. I know where I fall on that, and I feel great about that.
Parker just wrote an article about that. Whether they think it matters or not, it's still common sense.
But everyone agrees that that's what it is, and so that is amazing. And I think this pitch that like Bitcoin has always hypothetically been the most scarce thing because it has a finite supply and no other asset in the world has that. That's really hard for people to wrap their heads around. They don't really understand what that means. They're like, well, won't this computer code just change in 4 years? Like, how can we even know what that is? the whole concept is so foreign.
The biggest
and
counterpoint
next
I
week,
get
that
is
conversation
the
is
forks.
different.
The biggest
Yes.
counterpoint I get to that is the forks and and just the other blockchains, right? It's like, well, if it's scarce, how are there all these other ones? You can just make it just like,
How come people who embrace altcoins don't ask that same question of scarcity about those other coins? If indeed scarcity is one of the channels by which people find value in this whole
because they don't think that's where you get value.
Yeah, I think that those are more the people who they're not multi-coiners, they're no-coiners. So they're looking at it and saying, oh, well, you're telling me this is important because it's scarce, but there's 1,000 of these things. I don't like any of them, so therefore it's not scarce. And I was thinking about this yesterday. I feel like it's so obvious that like it trips so many people up, which is it's like try to copy a Bitcoin and send it to me, you know? Like, because the only way you're going to be able to send me a Bitcoin is if you go get approximately $10,000 and convert it and send it to me. Like, go try to copy Bitcoin. But you know, I think that I do agree with Michael that it's priced in for people that have it, but so many people don't. So therefore, it's not priced in. That you know, more and more people. Like, I do think that there is something to the halvening that causes it does harden the scarcity. Obviously, it creates a supply shock on the mining side, but then it also, and you know, I'll drink, but stock to flow model, which I'm not a religious believer in, but that the scarcity actually become like, not only does it become more scarce over time as a function of the supply going down, but more people demanding it creates scarcity. But more people demanding it also is a signal that more people recognize that there's a hard cap of 21 million. And then the mere instance of there being more people reinforces that it will only ever be 21 million. It's like, as Bitcoin decentralizes, and like that's I think why the price tracks this stock to flow model, is because it actually reinforces scarcity by more people recognizing that there's only ever 21
Parker,
million.
can you comment on the timing? Like how did the writer of this universe determine that COVID-19 should occur right at the Bitcoin halving?
Couldn't have. Not possible. But
Drew, you also keep saying the bad words, so you gotta drink.
He drank
He
that
did.
time.
He did.
Also, it's just in stark contrast to like what central bankers and governments around the world are doing, right? Like, as Bitcoin goes through this process of halvening, which is just programmed in, and nobody can really stop it from happening. You have all over the world people just inflating their currency at levels that we've never seen before. Right? Just so crazy that this timing is working out the way it is.
Do y'all like that show Dark on Netflix? Has anybody ever seen it? I won't spoil the plot. I think it's really good. But I will just add that one of the things that's cool about the show is it's about time travel, and it has a model of the universe where everything is consistent. So there's only one story. You can't change it. It's not many worlds. I won't spoil anything. But what I think is cool with the show is it's all about realizing that if everything is going to happen, the only mystery in life is why we do things. And it really explores the why of people's actions. And I think if the universe is like that, actually, that things are just determined and they are what they are, and that Bitcoin is just going to do its thing, and like it almost feels to me like again, thinking of our universe as some fictional show that someone is like penning and authoring, it feels like there's this connection that like I didn't know why Bitcoin would go up at the next halving, because is it priced in, is it not priced in, who knows what's going to occur. But now suddenly I have a really good reason. I can say, well, you know why it's going to go up? It's because COVID-19 happened, and everyone both underreacted and overreacted, and both happened, and everything got crazy, and all this money changes happened, and that's why everyone realized how valuable Bitcoin's scarce supply was. And it's almost like if this wasn't happening right now, I don't know what reason I would be giving myself for why Bitcoin should be mooning at the moment. But this is my current reason.
I want to say something about the whole idea of something being priced in. I think that's just economic fiction, and I think it's completely ridiculous that you can price anything in ahead of time, because until that event happens, there's nothing that's certain, right? Like, there's nothing that's certain. And To say that something is priced in is to say that you know the future, that you know exactly what how everyone will react to it and all of the variables that go around that. So I reject this notion that anything is ever completely priced in. Now, like there might be like a $3 dividend on a stock, and that might quote unquote be priced in. It's just that people are predicting it, and that they are predicting it accurately. That's all you can really say. It's not really priced in per se. The company, for example, could at the last minute pull that dividend because it's not completely certain. Until it happens, it hasn't happened. That's the idea. So in that sense, I don't think the halving is priced in at all. First of all, not that
isn't the halving certain?
The halving itself is certain, but people's reactions to it is definitely not.
And value is subjective, right? Like you can find somebody who, like if somebody wanted to buy a Bitcoin from me for $1 million today, I would probably sell it to them for $1 million, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So like, to Jimmy's point too, though, like, isn't the halving a certainty? It's like, yes, in our minds, but as soon as that block comes out 630,000 and the block reward 6.25, it hasn't actually happened yet. So like, is there a chance that, the miners just all say, nope, we're going to keep going at 12.5? Like it doesn't matter how small the probability is, but like it hasn't happened yet. So I do agree with Jimmy that you can't know kind of how people react until it actually happens. We actually learn new information once it does happen, which is like, as an example, we don't know exactly how much of the natural selling pressure is miners. We will never know, but we learn something about it once their supply of what they're earning gets cut in half.
Parker, to your point, what's really cool is imagine Satoshi's position, having invented this entire plan, and if nothing had gone wrong, if everything had been perfect, the halving occurs, if my math isn't wrong, on January 3rd this year. And to be wrong by 4 or 5 months over a period of 10 or 12 years is incredible. When you exerted no control over the system you're predicting other than the initial rules. So from that perspective, as inevitable as it is, because it was going to happen, like what's incredible is that it's happening roughly when the system by design agreed it would happen. And just watching that occur to me I think all of us on this call feel this way. It's just so deeply satisfying. Like it's what gives it that sense of inevitability, is that there were many ways it couldn't have happened. To your point, Bitcoin could have been defeated, lost, subverted, useless, broken. But the fact that more than a decade later, it's basically happening exactly when this person arranged for it to happen is incredible.
See you, Justin.
I wanted to give him last word, but if I could jump in at all, I've listened to a lot of these debates, and the most succinct thing I've been able to put together about this thought is the magnitude of the halving absolutely cannot be priced in, but it would make sense that miners with hardcore skin in the game that are investing for the future are investing with the idea of the block reward being cut in half as something that they calculate. So I mean, I think that
they'll be the least surprised by this. Yeah.
I mean, but they're the ones who are making economic decisions based on the future reward, at least in the near term. So I could see how miners are pricing in 6.5 reward or 6.25 reward, but the magnitude of the halving, it just can't be priced in.
It's also why proof of work is so important, because you actually have to invest something external to the system and making a bet on the future.
All right. So one thing I just want to correct about what Drew said, the original schedule would have been January 3rd, 2021, not 2020.
Oh, are we ahead of schedule?
Yeah, we're ahead of schedule by about 7 or 8 months because it was January 3rd, 2009. 12 years after that is 2021. So
no, you're right. Wow.
So we're about set, but that's but if you calculate stuff like the fact that we have an off by 1 error in several places, it's actually probably a little bit before that. Anyway, regardless, the entire the rant that was going on was about having being priced in. The hardest thing to predict are people's reactions to things. And if you think that's easy, try being a stand-up comedian. If you think you know what people's reactions are going to be, then you should be able to make them laugh with whatever jokes you come up with, because you know that these will will be a hit. But in fact, like there are very few very good stand-up comedians, which is why they get paid lots and lots of money. Predicting people's reactions to a particular event is very, very difficult, and that's why it doesn't make any sense that to say that there is such an event is already priced in.
Include on top of that, Jimmy, that like this will be the first time that a lot of people who read serious financial, publications will ever hear about Bitcoin.
I've talked to a lot of people. Very few people seem to not at least not have heard of it. I mean, like certainly anyone under 30, they've all heard of it. It's really only people maybe above 60 that haven't heard of it yet. And even among those people, it's very few.
Let me clarify. They will understand this aspect of Bitcoin, the halving schedule. That this will be the first time they've actually heard of it. It wasn't widely covered in 2012 and 2016. I think that this will be different.
I looked at Bitcoin in 2011. I was oblivious to the subsequent halving. The first one I remember was the one from 2016. Yeah, and I think first someone told me about it, I completely forgot it existed. It wasn't part of my calculus about how this world works of ours. Yeah, I don't know. It's the idea that everyone's got to figure it out to me is so crazy, because as we've reiterated multiple times on this call, this is such a small market. Like small markets are grossly inefficient with information. Like not everybody knows everything about it. It's not a thing. I think the halving of 89 or whatever year it will be in will totally be priced in, and it won't be very dramatic compared to the one that we're having this week.
And the relative shock at that point will be a lot smaller than what it is today.
Well, I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. We'll never get used to this. It's just every 4 years it's a bonanza. I don't know.
I think also to
kind of like saying the election is already predetermined right now,
yeah.
Which I mean, to some degree, it's a binary choice. Yeah, it might be, but this is a far more complicated thing.
Hey, can we go back to the fact that Bitcoin is 7 months ahead of schedule? Does that mean that adoption has happened quicker than Satoshi kind of programmed for?
No, it's just that the mining has happened, or that there's been more mining power being added throughout its history faster than. I mean, every 2 weeks it adjusts so that it happens. But had we stayed at the original difficulty, then it would, and about the same amount of hashing power was there, then it would be exactly on schedule. But equipment has improved, and the fact that we're only behind 7 months is the actual.
It's incredible.
Thing. Yeah,
like it's like Dead Reckoning a little bit. It's like if you have nothing to look at, you have no reference points. How are you supposed to navigate in a space and still know where you are? And somehow Satoshi dead reckoned the halvening down to 7 months from 12 years later.
Well, I mean, that's because of the difficulty adjustment that happens every 2 weeks.
Right.
It's a self-adjusting mechanism.
And I think what Jimmy's point is that the difficulty adjustment algorithm, as good as it is, has quote unquote underperformed or errored. If we want to view the original schedule as somehow sacrosanct, we're in error by a certain amount of months, and that is the dead reckoning kind of error integral over the last n number of years of this algorithm. And for an algorithm that no one is in charge of, that no one can control, that like essentially has been unmodified there's been some modifications, but essentially been unmodified for that entire period. That's incredible. I don't know of a similar feat that I could even compare it to.
And it's like 20 lines in C++. It's kind of amazing.
But wouldn't he have had to know that, like, because I think to Phil's point, like, because he made that comment about like these are either going to be worth a lot or they're not going to be worth anything. That if it was still existing 10 or 11 years later, that increased adoption would have had to have accelerated mining, such that on average the block time would have been faster than just 10 minutes.
Because the average might work out to be that over a longer time scale too, though, right? It's like the average, like we could end up getting back more on schedule as as mining starts to shift around, especially with the block subsidy moving around, right?
My
So-
nerd brain thinks that this like prime numbers. Like it is mathematically, I won't say proven because the Riemann hypothesis isn't true, but it's mathematically well suspected that prime numbers follow a very, very regular n log n progression over time. But the first 20 billion of them could be under by this amount, and the next X billion could be up above by this amount. And it's just kind of random how it kind of settles down over time to that eventual value.
Or even simpler, just flipping a coin, right? Like,
sure,
if you do
that's
it
a better
100
example,
times,
Bug. Thank you.
if you flip a coin, 100 times, you're not going to get 50 heads and 50 tails. But if you do it 10 million times, it will get a lot closer to that number. And so we might actually get closer to the right average 100, 200, 300 years.
I really don't think that's going to be the case because of the way the mining works. It's you would have to have many difficulty adjustments downward in order to get back to that average. Every time the difficulty gets harder, you're actually speeding up. Essentially, that means that the last 2016 blocks took less than 2 weeks. So it's more likely to get shorter over time, and it's actually not exactly 4 years. It's 210,000 blocks, which is very close to 4 years, but it's actually a hair under 4 years. So even if you calculate it out from January 3rd, 2009, actually ends up being slightly less than January 3rd, 2021. So like there are a lot of little fudge factors, but regardless, it's more likely to be less than 4 years for each halvening, just because technology gets better, and like you're not going to use ASICs from 4 years ago. That's just, and like unless Bitcoin price drops dramatically, like people generally hash rate generally tends to go up and not down. It would need to go down in order for it to be like that.
You don't see it going down
if hash rate's increasing over time, some of that hash rate's coming on right after difficulty adjustments, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's more hash rate just naturally than what was based on the average time of the trailing 2016 blocks, constantly, and it will be that way until hash rate's not growing. And
I like to think about it too. Like, all of the miners out there, like they know exactly how it works, right? So they're trying their hardest to game it in any way possible. Yeah. And, after 12 years of it trying their hardest to game this system, we're off by 7 months. So humans have been able to beat Bitcoin by like 7 months. Yeah.
Well, it's not that they're gaming it. The game is very much towards whoever has the most hash rate gets the most money. And that's the game. So, they're all trying their hardest to have as much hash rate as possible. And the degree to which it's increased over time is the 7 months difference. It's not like I think the sense I get from you guys is that it's somehow magical because it's off by 7 months only within like a 12-year span or something. That's not exactly it. It's the 7 month difference is the accumulation of the tiny differences in the 2 week adjustment periods, because 2016 blocks were found slightly faster each time because mining, they're all trying to mine as much as they can, as efficiently as they can. And because they were able to do that, or they found those efficiencies, that's where the 7 months comes from, not anything else.
Yeah,
the fact that it's only 7 months is the remarkable thing. In any other system, this would be be mined out in like a couple months or something. But yeah,
I think you're right, Jimmy. It's the magic part is that none of us on the call probably could have invented a system that would have delivered something like this 12 years from hence, with zero centralized control or anything like that. And I'm just sort of marveling at how right Satoshi really was with whatever he or she or they put out when they first started, because it wasn't exactly right. We've modified it in a lot of pretty important ways. I think that's something I really learned from Andrew Pulsera, and in one of the conversations I had with him is like, Bitcoin was fundamentally broken in some pretty important ways when it came out, and it took passionate people who were involved in the project to fix those things. But what they didn't really deeply change was the difficulty adjustment algorithm, except for perhaps the switch to heaviest instead of longest, right? And so like whatever. Fuck my gender politics. Satoshi got really, really right, really, really close, really, really early. That's incredible. Like that feels like a really wise choice.
With very little help too.
With very little help, with very little model. Like it's fine if you're the 50th blockchain and you get this right, but like you got it right from essentially the beginning, and that's really wise.
And so I got to push back a little bit on that, because if you read BitGold by Nick Szabo, it is very close. The two things that are missing are the difficulty adjustment and halving, and like having a competition for the blocks. But proof of work is in there.
Totally.
You know, the idea of a distributed ledger is in there, and even that was building on Hal Finney's stuff, reusable proof of work, and that in turn was building on Wei Dai's B Money and so on. So all of these things are built on top of each other. Satoshi's main thing was putting maybe a couple more pieces that would make the whole system work. So like Nick Szabo's,
Jimmy, but would you not say that one of Satoshi's big contributions was indeed the difficulty adjustment? Like out of everything.
So that's the main thing: the difficulty adjustment and the halving, and having a fixed supply. Those two were the big things that that Satoshi added. But like, I mean, you read, it's on NakamotoInstitute.org. You read Nick Szabo's BitGold. It is extremely close. It's very, very close. I did a read through it on my channel yesterday, and so it's fresh on my mind. But man, it's kind of amazing that this is why a lot of people suspect that Nick Szabo is Satoshi Nakamoto, because it's just a couple of ideas away, and you add those couple of ideas and you have Bitcoin.
All right, y'all.
Yeah,
Oh, go for it.
Amen. Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to change the subject. Amen to that. All right. Next subject is liquid, lightning, or other layer 2s. I was actually hoping that Justin was here because I know he's kind of a lightning skeptic at the moment.
Flaxman will take over for that.
Yeah.
All right. Flaxman,
no, my answer is all of the above. Lightning only helps. It can do no harm. It can only help. And I'm more of a liquid skeptic than a lightning skeptic. But, Bitcoin works great. I use it all day, every day for many, many years with perfect uptime by doing nothing. And I don't need to send any small denominated transactions for Bitcoin to work great for me and for so many other people. So I'm supportive of anything that
in hyper Bitcoinization.
Probably. Saif talked about this in Bitcoin Standard. His model was really, really simple of effectively Bitcoin banks settling IOUs. I would think they probably use Lightning behind the scenes. I think that will be the biggest use case of Lightning, will be transacting between two customers of trusted third parties. So, a merchant on something like a BitPay and a buyer of goods on something like a Coinbase for their wallet. But behind the scenes, those two trusted third parties will use Lightning or something like it to settle. And I think that'll be incredibly valuable.
It's a settlement layer that needs to be trustless, and that's the most important.
Yeah, what's the question here? Is anybody bearish on this?
No,
one's gonna be bearish.
We're just talking topics. We just want to discuss.
Okay.
We've moved on from bullish and bearish.
Sorry, I'm trying to react to things.
So there seems to be a little bit of debate about kind of like thinking about them qualitatively, like Lightning, the layer 2. Is Liquid a layer 2, or is it just a different kind of custodial model? Like there's functionaries, they've got 15 keys. You peg Bitcoin in. There's no trustless way out. And just like Lightning isn't as trustless as Bitcoin or the base layer, there still is a protocol where you don't have to rely on anybody to be able to close a Lightning channel and come back to the main chain. So, to me, I personally, I think they're both useful, but I think about them differently because of that.
And there's also other stuff that like state chains and things like that, which are really interesting in of themselves as well. And they all interact with each other. You can Lightning between a liquid sidechain and the main chain as a way to quickly transfer between them and so on. So there's a lot of interesting interdynamics between these layers. You can use a state chain to open a Lightning channel without an on-chain transaction, which is like kind of really badass stuff. But I mean, again, I think this all depends on what the market needs and what the market wants. Right now, it's really used as a store of value, right? Like as a way, not as a method of payment, which like people in Bcash seem to think is really important. Instead, it's used much more as a way to store value. Right now, on-chain is fine. Maybe in a few years that won't be the case, but until there's like a market need and there's a good product market fit, all of these things are still kind of in alpha or beta or something like that, where they're still looking for that killer use case that everyone will need.
Yeah, I do agree with that too. I think this is part of it. I mean, Michael made this point too, that when the application is needed for payments, that there will be a lot more capital, and the development around that it's like as things are needed in Bitcoin, that's when things get built. And right now, with 2% of people maybe having Bitcoin, a lot more, there needs to be a lot, the density of the holder base needs to be a lot higher before the practical application of payments would even be possible or useful. And today, when everybody just has the incentive to save in Bitcoin because they can spend dollars, why would you spend your Bitcoin? There's people that want to be paid in Bitcoin, but no one should realistically, unless it's a particular use case of like some cross-border, money, not transmission, but what remittances, like those would be like the cases where, Bitcoin would tangibly be better than say, using Western Union. But from a broad-based in terms of the overall architecture, it's I'm going to save my Bitcoin. Why would I spend my Bitcoin when I can spend my dollars? So I do think that that will be the guiding force, that like as it's needed in the space, that's where the real development investment will happen. I do think it's important for people just thinking about scaling that they see that path, because I do think it's a critical kind of ultimate path, but where we sit today, it's not necessary thing day to day for Bitcoiners.
That's why the fee market's so important, right? Like that's a signal of that.
But I'll throw a controversy in since there's too much agreement. Adam Beck tweeted a little over a week ago. It was a bit of a longer tweet, but one of the things that it said is that Liquid was more secure than Lightning. And I responded asking him to clarify, which he didn't. He had people took issue. It was a longer tweet storm. People took issues with other things. He said his definition of security is probability of hacker stolen funds, e.g. I put Lightning higher probability because it has hot exposure and hostile closed exposure. Probability of seized frozen funds, I put Lightning lower because there's no exchange operated federated HSM risk. But I was kind of surprised to hear that Blockstream is marketing Liquid as being more secure than Lightning. Given that in Lightning it's real Bitcoin.
Doesn't the latter sort of invalidate the former though? Like in terms of the security and hacking risk, like the fact that it's federated, the fact that there's 15, companies in charge of that wouldn't. I mean, I don't know how to quantify that necessarily.
I'm thinking maybe his argument is that you're a non-technical user and you can just run some wallet software and store funds on Liquid, but on Lightning you're more likely to mess up because it's complicated.
Oh, okay.
Maybe would be his argument.
I think that's a fair argument, but it's unfairly mixing levels of discourse. Like you cannot compare a competent user at one level to an incompetent user at another level. So you cannot say that you are totally competent at protecting your usernames and passwords to access centralized managed services, and we have to compare you against someone who's incompetent at managing their own keys or hardware wallets or other kinds of self-custody. And I think someone in Adam's position, with all due respect, is maybe incited to make that argument, because it is absolutely true that if you're willing to forego certain sovereign ideas and trust certain people, that it's a pretty secure system. And so maybe it's fair for him to make that posture.
Well, secure, but my point is secure from user error, right? Not necessarily more secure.
Sure. Yeah, and secure is a relative term, as everyone understands.
Which it sounds like he kind of clarified too, though, right? Like he was saying, like, depending on how you're evaluating security.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it says security. Bitcoin is greater than Lightning is greater than. Bitcoin is greater than Liquid is greater than Lightning is greater than Exchange. I thought that was a pretty bold claim.
This is also on Twitter.
Isn't there something inherent there where, maybe your Liquid can't be seized, but if you wanted to peg that out, it could be seized.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I mean, peg outs are a complicated thing. Lightning channel closures are kind of, come standard when you open the channel. Like, you already have that information.
Right, but like not even from like the technical side of pegging out, if some functionary, if there are 15 functionaries, it's a lot easier to coordinate. If the U.S. government went to the 15 functionaries of Liquid and said, "Hey, that Liquid address, don't
pay it out."
I think what's interesting, Parker, is that that's both a plus and a minus, depending on how you define what security means.
National? Are you thinking about national security?
But in terms of the Bitcoin context of censorship resistance or Caesar resistance,
yes, it's a net negative. I agree with you. 100% agree with you. I'm just pointing out that what we're seeing here is different constituencies catering to different markets. If you're willing to trust people that you can exert force over to do things for your behalf, it may be better for you to do it this other way, and that's totally reasonable if the market is like that. Honestly, I think one area where Bitcoiners, should I criticize us, can cede a little territory is not saying that, okay, that's fine for now, but look, here's our plan and we have a better solution long term, and this is why it's going to work out this way. And it could be the Lightning Network or something else, but this payments use case is important to people, and I think Bitcoin can already solve it with the way it's built today. We don't have to change much about it, and it'll be fine as it is. And I know a lot of folks on the call have already had this rant with me, so I won't get into it, but I really think that these are important areas, and we're fighting for what people think Bitcoin is and does for them a little bit as we solve these problems.
Also early days. There's going to be even newer alternatives, not just Lightning and Liquid coming in. I think it's also in defense of the Adam Back comment, that's like probably intentionally a little bit inflammatory. There's probably been more Bitcoin lost on Lightning than on Liquid, by user error, by hacks, by forced closures, by people having their node down, all this type of stuff. Again, it's like depends on how you're defining security, but people have lost Bitcoin from it.
But
so.
I think what's also to be important to point it out, though, is the Liquid network is tiny. It's very, very small today.
But it's just a multi-sig contract, right? So you're not going to lose that unless you get to you would have to get very, very big to draw the attention of the U.S. federal government to expose yourself to the risk of seizure. Whereas in Lightning, at that scale, Lightning is a lot safer because there's nobody for the federal government to kind of compel at that level. But at the lower level, you're asking people to be maintaining hot wallets and keep very high node uptime as well.
Are you guys familiar with any more obscure layer 2 attempts or solutions that are not Liquid or Lightning?
I mentioned state chains already. There's a bunch of different ones, and Ruben I think has another one, like a one-way peg or something like that. There's a bunch of different things that you can do that are interesting.
Don't forget about open dimes and physical coins. Neither of which are my favorites, but
I mean, you could argue then that like Coinbase is a layer 2.
Yeah, sure. It's a centralized layer 2. Yeah, I would
Yeah.
imagine that's the direction that Square will go in, like centralized layer 2 peer-to-peer.
No, Coinbase is layer 1/2.
Oh, yeah.
How would you define that, Drew?
I think layer 1, I have way too much to say on this subject, but I think layer 1 is where you hold your own keys. And as you go above layer 1, what you're talking about is computing collaboratively with multi-sigs. And how you do it is very complex, and it really changes depending on the layer that you're on. But below layer 1 is where you don't hold keys. So I think if your Coinbase is on layer 1, but I think Coinbase users are on layer 0.5. And I think people who buy at an ETF or something are even lower than that. They're closer to 0, which is to say not owning it at all.
Well, it seems like you got to leave soon. Do you want to give your last word?
Oh, no, I got 10 more minutes.
Okay.
Jimmy's the one who's got to go.
All right, Jimmy, you want to give your last word?
Halving is less than 4 days away. That's kind of crazy. And we are hitting... Well, we closed the day. We're back below 10,000, but we closed the previous trading day at above 10,000 for the first time since February 18th. We are very close to the high for the year, which is, I think, 10,525 or so. Before the halving, we might be going into a year-to-date high. And if we can somehow reach 14,000 or so, we'll have the highest price since January of 2018. So very exciting stuff. I think everyone is rightfully excited, and I look forward to what's going to happen in the next 12 to 18 months or so. I think that's the time frame that we're all looking at for all sorts of things happening. Taproot is a little more delayed than I thought it would be, and it looks like there's a lot of other things, essentially bull market related stuff that we're all looking forward to. So that's my last word. Fiat delenda est.
Peace.
Hey,
Thanks,
Jimmy.
Jimmy.
See ya.
Later, Jimmy.
So
Jimmy.
let's take a quick poll. How many people need to go in the next 10 minutes here? All right, let's go last word then. So we're going to skip the last two subjects unless someone has strong feelings about self-custody or Schnorr and Taproot. All right.
I mean, I think you'll have a lot of people here that have strong opinions on self-custody.
Yeah.
Do you guys want to chime in on that, or should we just go to last word? That's the question.
Let's do a little self-custody here.
All right.
Yeah.
We enticed y'all. All right. I mean, personally, I'm a big Unchained fan. I use you guys for some of my self-custody. I'm a big fan of having multiple different kind of bags. So you gotta stash your coin in different ways. But big fan of.
I'm gonna come out against that. I'm strongly against that.
Okay.
You want one really secure bag, crazy secure bag, and then you wouldn't put anything else in any other bag. And in the future, that bag is going to be a massive multi-sig. So if you really care, you could do a 3 of 5.
I don't trust
still kind of hard.
I don't trust anything right now, though. That's why I like to have multiple systems.
It's still kind of hard, but we're so close to multiple PSBT supporting hardware wallets. Kobo's adding it. Spectre is like still kind of DIY, but it kind of works. Cold Card is good. Trezor Model T has been like close for so many months. I don't know what the holdup is. And then we have all these tools to drive them, like Caravan at Unchained, but also a bunch of others. This is like so close. I know I've said that before, but we really are so close.
Maybe like 18 months away.
2 weeks.
The Kobo team is an exciting one because they're just messaging me all the time and they're like actually shipping products. There's some real hesitations about the method that they're doing it. Like they're built on top of Android, which is not the way I would secure coins in a single key setup, but I would not secure coins in a single key setup. So just for adding another layer and having something that's not written in Python. Not that, I mean, I love Python, but you don't want like all of your wallets forked from the same repo, which is kind of what you get if you have a Spectre, a Cold Card, and a Trezor. So that one is really exciting to me.
I also just think about it from, what's happening right now in the next 4 days, a lot of new entrants, whether institutional or otherwise, coming in, and something that, for all of us here, I believe, and especially Michael here, that we kind of take for granted is that we have all these new entrants coming in right now. And compared to even 2016, 2012, the previous halving events, the number of tools that are available for people now is immense, that there are almost no excuses for staying in a fully custodied model on an exchange or something like that. Like, you don't have to do that. And there are economical ways, obviously a lot of us here, work at Unchained, but there's real ways to do multi-sig. There are ways to do self-custody that just weren't available before, or were only available to very highly technical individuals who knew what they were doing. And now you have lots of services out there to allow you to custody your own keys, to the point where, if you're getting into Bitcoin and you're trying to own the underlying asset and not buying futures or something like that, you're really doing yourself a huge disservice by not holding your own keys and by not taking that one more step and realizing that it's so simple to do now.
I think that's going to be the next narrative that catches hold, right? Like, we're starting to hear most people appreciate that the scarcity and store value is super important. I think the next narrative, I am already starting to hear, it's like, oh yeah, I understand why I don't want to keep my Bitcoin on an exchange. Like, I have people that reach out to me that are just getting into Bitcoin and are asking me, like, as step one, learn about Bitcoin, or step one, basically buy it. Step two, how do I put it somewhere else? And they're coming to me to learn about it. So yeah, I think it's because exactly that was like the tools are becoming a lot better, a lot more user friendly, a lot like you have like fail safes and all these types of things that are good.
There's a bit of a balance that needs to be struck though, right? Like with private key ownership, like this responsibility is pretty huge. And so like, while we need to make it somewhat user friendly, like we also have to leave the like magnitude of the responsibility out there. So like, it shouldn't be too easy, because then people will just lose their keys. Like it's gotta have some weight to it, I think, still. So trying to strike that balance is really hard, but it's something that I think that a lot of teams are working on.
Well, another thing that's so exciting about custody is that right now people think of Bitcoin as much harder to secure than, say, like a gold coin. They just intuitively get that I can hide that gold coin, I can bury it, I can put it in a safe. Like, you don't have to explain to them how you would do that. It gets a little weird if you have like $10 million of gold, then they're like, okay, how would I secure that? But for most people, they kind of just get it. When you talk about Bitcoin, it's immediately like, oh, I could be hacked, or the software is complicated, or I'm going to mess up somewhere. What's this address? Like, everything about it seems inferior. But Bitcoin is actually the world's most securable asset. And so when people say like, oh, I can use 3 of 5 keys to protect this fortune, that's actually way better than gold. There's no way you can, have 3 of 5 devices needed to get your gold. There are those crazy locks that need 3 of 5 keys, but somebody can just steal the whole thing and, work on opening it later.
Or at least, to your point, Flaxman, it's at least as good, for God's sake.
It's better. It is definitely better.
but even if you don't understand multisig, if you can just say that Bitcoin is equal to these words on this paper, then you've just reduced it to, can I protect the paper? Which, if you can protect the gold, for God's sake, you can protect the paper. Bitcoin is saying you can do so much more than that you can't even imagine. And
I think we're underplaying it. Like, gold is extraordinarily difficult to self-custody in large quantities. This is a huge advantage for Bitcoin.
No,
and
dude, it's easy. It's easy. Ask my grandma. She got tons of gold. She keeps it in her kitchen drawer in her house. It's fine.
Yeah,
but
right?
People are used to paying to custody gold because they recognize that it's hard. It's not a weird business concept. If you tell somebody, hey, I'll store your Bitcoin and I charge you a fee for it, they're immediately like, ooh, but I could just do that for free. Yeah. If you tell someone, hey, we store gold, and there are plenty of gold vaults that do this, people might say, I'd rather do it myself for free and I want access to it. And that makes sense. That's very, very straightforward. But they're not like, that business model doesn't make sense to me.
Well, then let me rephrase then, right? It's extraordinarily difficult to store large sums of gold in a self-sovereign way, right? paying people to do custody, yeah, it's understood business model, but what are we doing here with Bitcoin? Like, that's one of the strongest attributes of the system that we're dealing with here, is that you can be sovereign and you can be secure at the same time, right? And that's extraordinarily difficult to do with gold or fiat. And multi-sig is really the answer to a lot of the problems that we have with gold that make it susceptible to being stolen, plunder, right? While those solutions, it's still in its infancy, our solution included, it's so much further along than it was, the last time we had halving, and there were a bunch of new entrants coming into the market. Being self-sovereign and secure at the same time, Bitcoin offers the promise that you don't have to sacrifice anything there.
So excited.
Also, custodying Bitcoin while on the run or while moving, like that is like the transportability while still self-custodying is something that is just undeniable.
I mean, I think it's pretty amazing that you can memorize and recite a 12-word spell anywhere in the world to buy pretty much anything for any amount of value, right? Like, you can secure $1 billion worth of value in a 12-word spell that you just, type into a computer. So it's pretty magical.
There have been those reports. I can't say whether they're true or not, that when people are leaving Venezuela, they put you through a metal detector and they take your gold.
Happened in the U.S. I wouldn't be surprised if it's happening in Venezuela.
I think also oil going to negative value kind of highlights, the difference with Bitcoin, because like it went to that because of the difficulty of transportation and storage, the cost of transportation and storage. And with Bitcoin futures, even, you wouldn't have that problem, right? Like the ease with which you can settle those contracts and transmit that value that it's storing. And I think that translates to everything. Like if you're trying to escape somewhere, the cost of storage is basically nothing once you've set it up.
In Bitcoin's scarce and oil's not.
It's limited supply, but yeah, that too.
Do we want to keep riffing on this, or should we move to closing it out?
I'm gonna head out, so
I gotta head out.
Let's close it out.
Yeah, last words. We'll start with Will, then Buck.
Oh, geez, I feel like I just went on my last words rant there. No, I think my last words would be that, with the halving coming up and, plan B, stock to flow, drink. That I'm hoping that anyone listening to this that is a new entrant, especially into Bitcoin, will seriously consider how they are going to be self-sovereign and store their funds and not leave it on exchanges. That bad things happen. You might not know that history yet, but hold your keys.
Cool. Buck.
Yeah, I would just say, it sounds like everyone on the call is on kind of the same page. There's a lot of bullish days ahead, but at the same time, being bullish on the long term doesn't mean there's not going to be some bumps in the roads and some difficulties, whether with Bitcoin or with anything else in these crazy times. But having the right principles at the base of it, which the story we were telling about Bitcoin, kind of or the narrative around Bitcoin really coalescing around store value, kind of shows how important having those first principles is. So in that vein, super bullish and excited to have more and more people coming on board with that.
Cool. Michael, you're next.
Cool. I'm just excited. I agree with Buck. There's future so uncertain. I get people asking me all the time, should I buy Bitcoin now? And I'm like, well, you should always buy Bitcoin, but I can't tell you if you should do it right now. Halving is, of course, very, very exciting, but Bitcoin has a way of punching you in the gut too. So future is very uncertain, but I am really excited.
Bitcoin takes the way of most pain, or of the maximum amount of pain. Phil, you're next.
I think all I can say is that in the event of a rapid financial depressurization, stack your own sats before assisting others to stack sats.
All right. True. Nice records, by the way. Are those records or paintings?
Let's not get into it. Things I did when I hadn't found Bitcoin yet. Let's just say that I'm excited as all y'all. This has been so fun. Thanks for having me on.
Cool. Parker, you want to close it out?
Yeah, so I'm also very excited about the halving, obviously, but more excited about Bitcoin. And I think that, again, everything that's happening in the world with QE and trillions of dollars being thrown around, that the more people are going to open up their eyes to what's going on. So
common sense.
As much as I like drinks in quarantine, I'm getting excited for people not being in quarantine anymore and going out and enjoying summer. So summer's on the horizon. Looking forward to that just as much as Bitcoin happening.
Awesome. Well, this was a great show, guys. Thanks for joining. Thanks for staying up late.